Are we ready to go? Are we recording is my real question. I wasn't worried about you so much as whether we were being recorded. All right. Oh, okay. Your clocks are wrong. I'm so, and I didn't. Momentarily. Now it's here. Okay. Good evening, everybody. This is the
Recording in progress.
This is the September 12th meeting of the Mansfield Town Council, and I will call the meeting to order. We have several members who are with us virtually, so I will be paying attention to them. I also want to remind the council that there are several times when we will have to become the Water Pollution Control Authority and go in and out of that status. So the first thing for us is a roll call. Ms. Chain?
Osberger.
Here.
Berthelot.
Here.
Bruder.
Here.
Mr. Bruder is here.
Coleman.
Here.
Bertoni.
Mr. Fertoni is excused for the evening. He may join us later.
Moran.
Here.
Shuren.
Here.
Shaken.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. The next item is a public hearing. But to do this, we have to become the Water Pollution Control Authority. Would somebody move that we become the Water Pollution Control Authority?
I move that the town council convene as town council and become the Water Pollution Control Authority.
A second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, it's unanimous. We are now the Water Pollution Control Authority, and we're about to have a hearing. Ms. Chain, would you read the call?
The Mansfield Town Council, acting as the Water Pollution Control Authority, will hold a public hearing at 7 p.m. at its regular meeting on September 12th, 2022. Solicit public comment regarding changing the sewer use charges for the Windham Sewer Fund and the Yukon Sewer. This hearing, persons may address the Town Council, acting as the Water Pollution Control Authority, and written communications may be received. A copy of the proposed charges is on file and available at the clerk for South Eagleville Road, Mansfield. The town's website, mansfield.gov, dated at Mansfield, Connecticut, this 20 August.
All right, for those of you who don't know what this is, Mansfield has two sewer systems, one at the southern part of town, which is part of the Windham sewer system, and one in the northern part of town, which is the Mansfield sewer system, but also is shared with the University of Connecticut. Both of these agencies bill us for sewer usage. The rates are set annually. They were already set in the town's budget, but since the council has the authority to set these rates, it was deemed appropriate for us to have a public hearing on the issue. Is there anybody here who wishes to speak to the issue of the Yukon and Willimantic sewer budget rates? And we have no virtual or hybrid interest presentation either? Right.
The town engineer / DPW director and assistant town engineer are here. If the council wants additional information, it obviously will be discussed under new business as well later in the evening.
All right, is there anybody who wishes us to continue the public hearing? Seeing no sign of that, I will declare the public hearing closed. And now we need a motion to resume our activities as the Mansfield Town Council. Mr. Osberger?
I move to reconvene as the Mansfield Town Council and to disband as the Water Pollution Control Authority.
I will second that.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And it is unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Shaken?
Hi, good evening. I know that later on in our agenda, much later on, down on page 325, is an appointment to fill an existing town council vacancy, a recommendation from the Mansfield Democratic Town Committee. And I would like, given that I think I see very, very distantly on Zoom, that Dr. Cotton is with us in the audience, I'd like to move that appointment up in our agenda to take place now. That's a motion.
The motion is to move the agenda, change the agenda to move the appointment of Dr. Cotton to now rather than to later, as second by Ms. Berthelot. I'm still coming to, sorry.
There's a motion here. I would like to read the motion, if that'd be okay.
Well, let's vote on whether to change the agenda first. All those in favor of changing the agenda? Okay, it is unanimous. Go ahead.
Move effective September 12th, 2022, to appoint Dr. Carlita Cotton, Democrat, to fill the vacant seat on the town council, which was previously held by Peter Kotzenberger, a Democrat.
It's their second. Mr. Shaken seconds. Anybody wish to speak to this motion? Mr. Shaken, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Only if Mr. Coleman doesn't after he made the motion. I'm happy
Okay,
to.
Mr. Coleman first, and then Mr. Shaken.
Yeah, sure. I think Carlita Cotton will make a great addition to our town council. I've gotten to know Carlita since the Memorial Day Parade, and I've had the pleasure hearing her speak at a NAACP event at Lakeside Tavern in Coventry. Her ability to work with people and have others work with her is absolutely amazing, and I support this nomination.
Thank you. Mr. Shaken?
Thanks. As some of you know, in my non-town council life, I'm the chairman of the Mansfield Democratic Town Committee as well. And so I will tell you that the DTC voted unanimously at its August meeting to endorse Carlita for the council. Carlita is the current vice chair of our Planning and Zoning Commission. And so they are unhappy with us that we are stealing some of their best, but I'm also very excited for her to join us on the council. Carlita has been a really wonderful addition to local government over the last several years. I can't remember the exact date off the top of my head. I think she was elected first to the Planning and Zoning Commission about 4 years ago as an alternate, and has really learned a lot about zoning. She comes as a longtime member of our community, as well as a longtime Air Force veteran. She's a professor at, I believe, at Goodwin College of Psychology, and I will let her introduce herself more than that, but she will be a wonderful addition. I hope everyone will support her appointment.
Anybody else wish to speak to the motion? Mr. Osberger?
Yes, as chair of the Mansfield Republican Town Committee, I'm looking forward to her appointment and looking forward to working with her.
Thank you. Anybody else? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. It is definitely unanimous. Mr. Bruder votes twice. Well, Carly, come forward. Welcome. Ms. Chain will swear you in.
With a picture?
Ms. Cotton, this seat is vacant, so if you would.
Might as well. That's
yeah,
right.
come sit
I would
on
like to
my
recommend
left
a
hand.
new town council group picture.
We'll arrange the group picture
Perhaps when
and
they're
the
all here?
portrait. Yeah, once we're all here. Do you want to say anything to introduce yourself to the assembled multitudes?
I would be remiss if I didn't thank each and every one of you for your kind words, for your endorsement, and for allowing me to serve the people of Mansfield in a new capacity. I'm very excited about it. As was said, I do like to collaborate and work well together with others. I'm looking forward to working with you to make Mansfield the best possible municipality in the great nutmeg state of Connecticut.
Spoken like a real politician. All right. The next item on our agenda is an opportunity for the public to address the council. Are there members of the public who wish to speak to us? Please come forward. We have a 5-minute limit on speaking, and ask you to identify yourself, give your name and address. Also, within the confines of 5 minutes, to be as brief as possible and be civil. So who would like to speak to the council? Please come forward. It's important that you speak directly into the microphone because these microphones require that they be close to your mouth in order to pick up your voice.
Yeah, I talk soft anyway, but I'll speak a little louder today. My name is Marlene Dutra. I live at Juniper Hill Village on Alder Lane in Stores. And I'm here because I usually do read the minutes and agenda, even though I don't attend every meeting. And I noticed that the owner of Big Y wanted to put in front of the council a consideration of a panhandling ordinance. Now, unfortunately, the owner does not live in Mansfield because we do not have a panhandling problem. We do have a couple of unfortunate people desperate enough to stand in any kind of weather, I guess at the plaza where Big Y is. But I've noticed recently that he's put in a sign that says no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted, and that seems to have kept most people away. People I have seen there look very desperate and compromised. I don't think anybody would want to do that unless they had to. So that made me start thinking about, hearing about all the retirements in town, our staffing shortage for human services. And so I'd like to ask the council to prioritize. We have right now, Kathy Easley just retired, our only social worker for Mansfield. The 2 youth services social workers are not, the vacancies they're empty. The senior center is down a driver and their food service person, which puts an undue burden on the rest of the staff there. And they do a really darn good job as it is, and that's really going to cut back on the events and everything else there. Human Resources Director has left, and their assistant is gone. So I would like to see the town council make that a high priority. And the only thing a panhandling ordinance would do is, relieve the uncomfortableness of seeing somebody in a desperate situation. It really doesn't address the problem. And that's the only place, aside from the exit off Route 6, that I've ever seen a panhandler in Mansfield. So that's all I have to say. I just hope you know that it's important that those positions are filled. I know that that's a problem these days everywhere, but it should be a high priority for the town council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the council?
Hi, my name is David Palmer, and I live at Juniper Hill. And I'm wearing 3 hats tonight, and I'm feeling a little awkward because I'd understood that there'd be a slide presentation that the Commission on Aging would be giving tonight, and then I see it's down at the bottom of the agenda for waiting for all the seniors at the end of the evening to speak. So I'm kind of preempting. One hat is to kind of preempt that and let you know, as my first hat as the secretary of the JHV, Juniper Hill Village Residents Group, which represents about 107 of the residents at Juniper Hill. We follow the Commission on Aging work of the town very carefully, and have and know that a lot of the issues that they're dealing with are issues that we deal with as well. And the 3 that are kind of prominent right at the moment are the issue of affordable housing for the town, given that, Juniper Hill is really the only place that has affordable housing for seniors at the moment in town. And we know up close and personal what a difficult issue that is, and we know what a waiting list we have for people to get in, and what a crisis that is in the town. The second being the senior center, which is right next door, and we continue to hope that the town will increase the prioritization of building a new senior center, and include the input from not just the Commission on Aging, but also groups like the residents group at Juniper Hill, because I think we've got a lot to say and contribute, and of course we use it a lot, being right next door. And the third issue is being the WRTD transportation issue, which is a huge issue for seniors in town, always has been. Lord knows we'd love to have something as convenient as Uber, if it was available by phone for seniors, but we don't have that. And so I'm going to switch to hat number 2, which is a statement from one of the residents at Juniper Hill that she asked me to read. So this is from Judy Lester, who's a resident of Juniper Hill, on the issue of transportation. The transportation for seniors, as it stands now, is pathetic. WRTD/DAR, as its former self, worked well for those located in Willimantic. Outside of Willimantic, not so much, but it's worse since technology took over. Computers have no common sense. Today, a senior is brought to Walmart at 8 or 8:30-ish in the morning and must wait until the afternoon with all their bundles to be picked up. Oh, and by the way, the drivers are not allowed to help get their purchases onto the bus. Then, on the ride home, with all of the stops the bus has to make, a rider doesn't get home until mid-afternoon. We're talking about elderly here. They no longer have the stamina they once did. And please note, it's still a whole generation of people out there who do not, nor wish to have, computers. So they just stay in their houses rather than go out and face such an arduous day. Do I have answers or suggestions? How about contacting many other towns to assess their system in an effort for new ideas? Personally, I would reprogram the computer to shut off and bring back a human with common sense to do the route. So that's, and I can that. And finally, my third hat, I hope I'm not out of time yet. Very quickly, I also serve as one of the founding members of Bike Mansfield, which is our local advocacy group that we work with the town. And we just had a meeting last week, our monthly meeting last week, and one of the topics of conversation that I know has been a topic of discussion in the town is what to do about South Eagleville Road and the traffic problems, traffic pedestrian problems. And I know we're talking about, some various options. One of the things that we would like you to strongly consider, and I understand, we understand that it's a state road, but it intersects with town roads as well. We heartily endorse thinking about roundabouts rather than stoplights. And there's lots of data that shows that roundabouts are a far better solution in most circumstances than roundabouts. We're specifically talking about Separatist Road, where the final portion of the sidewalk that needs to happen connecting Separatist Road and to Maple Road is, I understand we've got the funding for it, and at some point that'll be in the works. And with the state talking about discussing a stoplight, we don't know where those discussions are at. We hope to find out at some point. We certainly hope to be included in those discussions, but just at this moment would like to put up a flag for roundabouts on South Eagleville Road. And that's it. Did I do it?
Thank you.
Did I make it?
Is there anybody else who wishes to address the council? I would encourage those of you who are interested in the senior center to pay attention to the municipal facilities needs assessment as well. Anybody else wishing to address the council?
We have a email communication. that
That's
was-
right, that's right.
Okay. all right.
Which I will read. This is from Elizabeth Wassmond. She is objecting to our pandemic premium pay. Says briefly, I object to this motion. To vote for it, you are spending my tax money without providing me and all the other Mansfield taxpayers the right to vote for or against it. But then this is the way the Mansfield Council has operated for many years. I would agree to giving a more substantial bonus from the appropriate federal funds to those employees who work directly with the public, such as the firemen. But to give any bonus to, say, the employees in the town clerk's office is a slap in the face to all town taxpayers who had to go to work and directly interact with the public, such as the cashier at Price Chopper. The town clerk's office employee received full pay throughout the pandemic, worked from home, or returned to the office to work while the public was locked out of the building. Not much risk there. A taxpayer such as I might think this bonus is a cynical attempt for the Democrats to lock in votes come next election and for the town manager to ensure a good employee review. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Watsman. Is there anybody else who wishes to contribute to our public comment? Seeing none, I declare the opportunity for public comment closed. See what happens when you do that. My computer goes away. That's just one moment.
I believe my report's up next.
All right. The next item on the agenda is the report of the town manager. Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Mayor. So that the council is aware, at a minimum, next Monday through Thursday and potentially Monday through Friday, I will be out of state on vacation. Ms. Shane, our town clerk, to my right, will be serving as the acting town manager for the period of time that I'm out of the state. Happy to report that we have second round interviews, basically our interviews with finalists for the Director of Planning and Development position this week. I think I'm at the front of the line of people that are very eager to see this position get filled because there's really important work to be done, and that has implications for a lot of what's going on in town right now. And so looking forward to having that process conclude and having the right person named in the near future. This past week, or maybe it was a couple weeks ago now, August 31st in any case, I was part of a few local officials that were invited to participate in a meeting with representatives from the Mansfield Nonprofit Housing Corporation, as well as some of their consultants and project manager / architect to get an update on the Eagleville Green Housing Project and talk about next steps. And sort of in broad strokes, the folks that we spoke with are optimistic that the remaining pieces of state funding, we've come a long way. Many, many millions of dollars have been committed to the project, not the least of which was the Communities Challenge grant that the town applied for and received on behalf of the project, but there's more money that still needs to be committed, more state funds, and they're optimistic that by the end of the calendar year, we'll have some certainty on that front, and their goal is to break ground in the spring. So I think it's definitely an ambitious timeline, but they're trying to, they have eyes towards completing the project by the summer of 2024. So that would be a relatively quick turnaround. This past Friday, myself and others joined representatives from Yukon to receive a briefing on the status of the conceptual plans for the redevelopment of the Mansfield apartment site across South Eagleville Road from us and from the community center. I believe this will be an item of discussion at an upcoming Yukon Board of Trustees meeting, so they wanted to give town officials a heads up of what the trustees were going to see. Very aggressive timeline. They're definitely trying to fast track the project. We agreed that it would be a great opportunity for the right folks from Yukon to come out for a public meeting. Perhaps could be billed as a special meeting of the town council for Yukon to provide an update on the project for all interested stakeholders to hear what they're proposing. So stay tuned. No date has been identified, but we're looking at basically the first half of October. Also on the topic of Yukon, as the council's aware, I was invited to serve on the advisory search committee for the selection of the next president. That process has been underway for some months now. There's now a very small pool of finalists. I believe around 3 individuals started off north of 100 names and has been trimmed considerably. And in-person interviews with those finalists are being arranged for the near future. So looking forward to seeing who the finalists for that position will be and hearing their vision for University of Connecticut. As the council knows, because I sent out communication on this last week, our Director of Human Resources, Holly Schaefer, did signal to me her intention to step down from the position early October. It'll probably be on or around October 7th, but Holly wants the transition to go smoothly, and she knows it can be a challenge to get interim services in place, and so work with Holly on her exact departure. But we have started the process of looking for interim services. HR is an incredibly important function. I think during the public comment period that was evident. We have a number of vacancies that we're working very diligently to fill. It is a tough market for sure, but we have vacancies across a number of departments, and we're certainly working to get the right people in those positions as quickly as possible. But on a personal note, I just want to thank Holly for her service. She's been a tremendous resource for me, very welcoming to me. She was, I think, only on the job maybe under 12 months anyway, maybe 10 months or so when I started. And so she was still, very much navigating a learning curve, being new to municipal HR work, but she's been a valuable resource, a trusted colleague, and she will be missed. And wishing her the best, certainly in her next endeavor. Mansfield Local Government Academy, we have our first session of the 12 sessions that we've planned for this year coming up this Thursday. It'll be in this room. We're going to cover a wide range of topics, everything from governance and administration to municipal budgeting, the office of the town clerk, and elections. Happy to report we're actually at 21 registrants, so almost double what we had last year, which is great. And the enthusiasm is palpable, probably because they're all really eager to hear about the town clerk's office and everything that Sarah Ann does. And the biggest complaint I think we got in last year's reviews was they didn't get to see the vault. We talked about seeing the vault. We kind of promised them the vault. There was a lot of talk about vault. It didn't materialize, so we really need to work on that. Tomorrow, myself, the Director of Parks and Recreation, and others have been asked to take part. We'll be interviewing firms that responded to our request for proposals for the comprehensive financial sustainability strategy and master planning effort for Mansfield Parks and Recreation. As the council knows very well, the community center and Parks and Rec more broadly has been experiencing a number of financial challenges in recent years, many of which have been exacerbated by the pandemic, and we're trying very hard to come up with innovative and effective strategies for bringing membership back into the fold at the community center. And we're very excited to meet with some candidate firms that have a tremendous amount of knowledge and expertise on the business planning side of Parks and Rec organizations. Just a couple other notes. We have been receiving a lot of communication in the last few days about the status of both the affordable housing plan in town and the recently established Affordable Housing Committee, as well as the Neighborhood Stabilization Plan, which, again, that's kind of focusing on the northwestern part of town, what we call the Hunting Lodge Road area, where Goodwin School is an anchor. So I just want to say, publicly that we definitely appreciate the interest. This will be a very stakeholder-intensive engagement process, and that, frankly, the single biggest contributing reason why we've been a little slower out of the gate on both those fronts is the need really to have a permanent director of planning and development, as the planning and development department is staffing those efforts. So the staff crunch has been a little bit of a challenge, but again, we're looking to remedy that in the days ahead. So I think I will stop my oral report there. There's obviously a lot more to read about in my written summary. Happy to field any questions from the council.
Council members have questions for town manager. Go ahead, Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Ryan. You didn't touch on Mansfield Elementary School project. We are facing, obviously, a delayed opening with the school. Could you update us on the timeline on the completion of the school? Are we looking at 2022, 2023? Can you give us a ballpark on that?
You're correct that the project has been delayed. Obviously, the original goal was to have the facility open for the first day of school this year, and that date has come and gone. There has been no official adjustment to the project completion timeline that the school building committee has agreed to at this point. There are prospective timelines, if you will, that the contractor, Newfield Construction, has shared with Colliers, the owner's project manager, and we continue to zero in on what that final completion timeline and building opening schedule will be. Superintendent Dart, for reasons I think we can all appreciate, is very mindful of not announcing an expected completion date or move-in date until we are 100% sure that we will hit that date. So basically what we're working with now is a few of the remaining unknowns, if you will, the bigger ticket items that are that have slowed progress to this point. We're expecting in the next couple of weeks to have resolution to at least know their status, and at that point have the clarity to be able, for the school district, to be able to communicate to our families what the move-in date, expected move-in date will be. We're just not quite there yet.
Okay, I have been following the project in the school building committee since December of 2021, and quite honestly with you, it's been plagued with issues and problems, such as delays, poor construction practices, construction flaws. I would like to take this moment to propose a motion, and I would like to pass that motion around to the council.
This is a part of the agenda which deals with the town manager's report. Are you wishing to add an item to the agenda?
I would like to propose a motion in regards to the Mansfield Elementary School, yes.
Then I think we need a motion to add the elementary school to the agenda under new business.
Okay, I'd like to propose a motion to add to the agenda under new business, a motion for the Mansfield Elementary School.
Is there a second to Mr. Coleman's motion to add the elementary school item to the agenda?
I will second that.
Moved and seconded. Do you wish to speak to your motion quickly?
Do I want to speak to the?
To the motion to add an item to the agenda.
I'm just terribly concerned at the lack of progress that's which is occurring at our Mansfield Elementary School site at the moment. And I would like to see that expedited so we can complete this project.
All right. Anybody else wish to speak to this motion? I will say that I also serve on this committee. Speaking as a member of the council, not as the mayor. I think that we have an owner's representative, we have members of the council, we have an architect, we have various consultants. I think everybody has been pushing the construction and of this project as hard as possible. There have I'm not going to speak to the motion. I'm merely speaking to the adding it to the agenda. So, anybody, Mr. Shaken, and followed by Ms. Berthelot.
Thanks, Mayor. If I could just ask a quick question through you to the opponent of the motion, it would be helpful for me to know whether to support adding this to the agenda or not. If Mr. Coleman could briefly summarize what he intends to move if this item is successfully added to the agenda. Through you, Mayor.
Mr. Coleman, can you briefly summarize what your motion would achieve?
I can summarize it for you. The motion is going to involve dissolving the Mansfield School Building Committee and repopulate the committee through an application process based on qualifications.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Berthelot?
I appreciate the effort that Mr. Coleman and yourself have put into going to these meetings. I think this is way too big of an issue to make a decision on without having the relevant folks involved speak to the issue and to give us an update. So this is not a motion that I'll support.
Anybody else wish to speak to the motion? Motion is to add this to the agenda. All right, I'll call a vote. All those, Ms. Chain, would you do a roll call vote on these? All those in, the motion is to add an item to the agenda which would disband the school building committee.
Osberger,
Yes.
Berthelot,
No.
Bruder,
No.
Coleman,
Yes.
Hutton, Moran,
No.
Shuren,
No.
Shaken.
No.
Thank you.
The motion fails. Okay, so with that, you do no longer have an opportunity to make this motion because it has not been added to the agenda.
Am I able to make a motion at any time during a town council meeting when I have the floor?
No, it has to be on the agenda, and in order to get it on the agenda, you have to add it to the agenda, unless it is a topic which is already on the agenda. It's a matter of public notice.
Okay. We can put it on future agendas at the end then.
All right, that's fine. All right, the next item on our agenda, further questions for the town manager? All right, then we are ready to go to reports and comments of council members. I'll start with my own. I had the honor of representing the town of Mansfield at the bicentennial celebration for the founding of Chaplin this weekend. Mansfield, Windham, and Hampton contributed land to found Chaplin. The town's first meeting was held on July 4th, 1822. I will note that the boundary lines weren't finalized until a couple of years ago when we had a border dispute with Chaplin and we had to do surveys and rewrite the borders. What I didn't know is that Windham had opposed the separation of Chaplin, and they actually sent people to the General Assembly to oppose the legislation, which apparently passed anyway. It was a lovely opportunity and a great celebration. On a more personal note, I wanted to thank people for the well wishes that I received over the past month since I fell at the farmer's market and ended up with surgery and a 2-week stay at the rehab center where I had absolutely wonderful care, and I really want to thank the staff of our emergency fire people. I managed to do these things right at the right time and place, always with firemen nearby to rush with a stretcher when I need one. And the staff at the rehab center was absolutely wonderful. Unfortunately, they kicked me out after only 2 weeks, so I had to go home and cook my own meals. But I really am very grateful for the quality of services that are available to Mansfield residents in this community, and I do want to publicly thank those people for their for their assistance. Any other comments from council members? Yes.
I just want to echo the town manager's comments on Holly Schaefer. I've had the opportunity to work closely with Holly through the Personnel Committee, and it's a vitally important function, and she's handled it extremely well.
Thank you. Mr. Bruder?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say thank you to the Board of Ed and the new superintendent, Peter Dart, in regards to, I have two sixth graders at the Mansfield Middle School. Obviously, things have been a little bit chaotic with the bus routes, and I know a lot of residents have been commenting about that, but I feel like he's done a good job of taking hold and working together to get something, given this new reality of less bus drivers.
Thank you. Anybody else on the council wish to make a comment? All right, the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. There are a series of things on the consent agenda. One of them is minutes of our last meeting. Then there's a federal local bridge program. Mr. Aylesworth, could you speak briefly to what the bridge program is?
So the program you're referring to, Mayor, would typically require, it's a state-run program. The funding typically requires a local match in order to receive funding to complete a bridge project. This year, and perhaps really once in a lifetime type thing, because of the enhanced federal funding for infrastructure that's been working its way through the states, for the first time, I believe, the program does not require a local match. So basically, if a project receives funding, it'll be 100% funded by the state. And so, as you see in your packet, there are 4 specific bridge projects that are being proposed by our public works staff.
And these are, we are approving only the application for this funding.
Correct. Yeah, so we'll go back. If awarded, or if we're offered a grant award, it'll come back to the council to accept the funds.
Okay. The next 3 items are all from the Finance Committee. Ms. Hall, would you come speak? Mr. Shaken?
Yeah, I'll just introduce them very quickly. They all passed unanimously from the Finance Committee. These are our year-end actions that we take at the end of the fiscal year. So these documents have to do with the last quarter, actually with the whole fiscal year that ended on July 1st. So this is not having to do with our current budget year, at least as much as where these dollars are budgeted when the documents in your packet talk about budgeted versus actual. We're talking about last fiscal year. And so if the finance director is making her way forward, she can give a very brief overview of some of the highlights, but we did go through them in detail at the Finance Committee earlier today.
I think so.
Mike.
Pull the microphone a little closer.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Thank you.
So again, as Mr. Shaken has mentioned, this is for the end of the fiscal year 21-22 that ended on June 30th. And the respective items, every quarter we come before you with a quarterly financial statement. This is the last quarter. So the way I like to do it is you do the quarterly financials, you get a full understanding of what transpired in the quarter, then you do the year-end review so that you understand what we shook out. We were in good standing. We are in a position of having spent $393,000 less than what we budgeted, and therefore staff made recommendations on how to reappropriate those dollars, and those recommendations are outlined in the memo for your review. In addition to that, we do what I call housekeeping with the capital improvement budget, where we, as you all know, some things escalate, some things cost a little less because these are projections. when we go to get approval for these projects to be conducted. So in the last memo, which is your CIP adjustment memo for the end of fiscal year 21-22, it speaks to not only the small dollars that are moving for projects that are either overspent or underspent, but also it incorporates the recommended transfers that we speak to that are hitting the capital fund versus the general fund. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Thank you. Would somebody like to move the consent agenda? Ms. Berthelot moves the consent agenda. Mr. Shaken seconds. Are any questions on or comments on the consent agenda? All right. All those in favor of the consent agenda, please raise your hand. Adopted unanimously. All right, next item on our business is pandemic pay for town and school district employees. Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Mayor. The council will recall at the meeting in August, this issue came before you for action at that time. Proposed one-time COVID premium pay award program and the mechanics and the eligibility and the dollar amount, et cetera. Basically, the explanation of the whole program, what it was, how it came to be, from its sort of humble origins as an idea, that was discussed in earlier on in council meetings. However, final action was tabled on administration of the program or authorizing administration of the program because there were some concerns raised. Councilor Shuren being, I think, sort of the voice for that. Concerns raised about the status of funding or lack thereof, funding from the other two towns that comprise our three-town regional school district number 19. We've been in communication, I'd been in communication with the first select people in both Willington and Ashford to discuss what the town of Mansfield was looking to do, more specifically to administer one-time COVID premium payments in the pre-tax amount of $400 to a wide swath of eligible employees that worked for the town for at least a 6-month period from the beginning of the pandemic in March of 2020 through basically the end of May 2021, which is when municipal facilities started to reopen and people, essentially at that point, adults anyway, had an opportunity to be fully vaccinated. After additional conversations with Willington and Ashford at this time, I cannot report that there has been any concrete movement on their part. Willington, I think in particular, has signaled a desire to potentially move in this direction in the future, but they understand that it's Mansfield Town Council's desire to take final action on this. And there are, of course, 3 groups of employees that we're talking about. We're talking about municipal, town of Mansfield, municipal employees, Mansfield Public School employees, and Regional School District number 19 employees. So essentially the update I have for you is that there's been no demonstrable change since the last meeting in terms of commitment from the other 2 towns in the regional school district. So at this point, I think the town council needs to decide how it wants to respond to that information.
Thank you. To get this item on the table for discussion, I would like a motion. The motion is on page 298. Ms. Berthelot?
Move effective 2022 to amend the fiscal year 22-23. I'm reading the right thing, right? Yes. Capital non-recurring fund budget to appropriate $194,000 to provide a one-time pandemic bonus award to eligible employees working for the town of Mansfield, Mansfield Board of Education, and Regional School District 19 in the amount of $400 pre-tax per employee for an aggregate amount of $194,000.
Is there a second to this motion? Mr. Bruder seconds. Ms. Berthelot, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you. I fully support this idea. I think that all of the employees who stepped up, this isn't a whole lot of money. It's almost more of a a recognition, but it's duly deserved. All of the teachers, including the Region 19 teachers, are stepped up with great creativity, thoughtfulness, and heart to make sure that the students were able to get through a difficult time. Of course, many of these teachers, not all, are women and others are family members that they were negotiating this very difficult time while they were also taking care of their own children often, or grandchildren. And I can speak from my own experience as a parent that they made all the difference in the world. And to the point of made during public comment regarding town employees who seemed to be perceived as maybe having a luxury to work at home, ignoring how difficult that would have been. Again, many taking care of their own families while continuing to take care of our town, figuring out the technology, staying on top of things, answering phone calls, staying just as busy, and in staying home, keeping us all safe, because we all had to stay home, because remember, the virus was contagious, so making the choice to keep us all safe. So I hope that everybody will support this motion of recognizing the work put in by the people of our town for our entire community. Thank you.
Mr. Shaken.
Thanks. I also support this motion. And I will just say I'll be the first to acknowledge that I think it's imperfect in a variety of ways. First of all, as Terry mentioned, it's not a heck of a lot of money. And I think I want to commend Ryan and Holly for taking the extra time that they've taken since this was originally sort of put down on paper several months ago, to make sure that we were providing what I would say is sort of the bare minimum to be a meaningful amount of money, that we weren't going to sort of give people gift cards for $50 and say, thanks, have a good one. So I think it's also, though, imperfect in some of the larger ways that folks on the council have previously identified, and just say that I agree. I wish there was some way that we could provide this bonus to every member of our community who was on the front lines during the pandemic, regardless of who their employer was, and regardless of whether their employer decided to do this on their own volition during the pandemic, and regardless of whether they'll get eligibility from the state funds that are available for these purposes. And I also wish that that we were able to secure equitable buy-in from our regional towns in Wilmington and Ashford, because I think that the funding mechanism that the region enjoys is important to try to keep consistent. However, I think the act of doing what we can do within the confines of our box as an employer, as a town, as a community that employs hundreds of people, is most important. And I would hate to let some of those perfect scenarios get in the way of doing something good. So I support this, and I support funding it in the mechanism that is being proposed, so that we can provide the thanks needed to our staff, not just in town hall, but in both the Mansfield Board of Ed and the Regional Board of Ed.
Thank you. Ms. Schaefer? I saw Ms. Schaefer's hand is raised, but
Oh, I think that's the, that's the mouse hovering
that's the
over
mouse.
the.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Mr. Shuren.
Yeah, I support the thrust of this motion. I am concerned, I continue to be concerned about the issue of Region 19. And so I would propose, and I'm going to propose an amendment, that we wait until we do get buy-in from the other two communities and then add that amount of money, proportional amount for Region 19. So at this point, I'm going to propose an amendment to delete the words Regional School District 19 from the motion and change the amount from $194,000 to $137,200.
So that would simply eliminate the
Eliminate
payments to
payment to
Region
Region
19.
Hoping and pending buy-in from the other two communities, at which point we will join in and add that amount of money that will be an equitable amount. And that would be, in that case, 59% of the amount that they.
Okay, are those words part of your motion? Okay, so your motion is only to eliminate Region 19 and to reduce the amount.
Yeah, and I should say, I was a member of that board for 7 years. I value greatly every person that works for the region, particularly the teachers, and I hope that we can get this worked out. But I do believe that the principle of this being a regional school district is an important one.
Is there a second to Mr. Shuren's motion? Seeing no second, the motion fails. All right, we're back to the main motion. Any further discussion, Mr. Osberger?
In as much as I do appreciate Councilor Berthelot's concerns, I agree with them wholeheartedly, and I agree with Ben's concerns, and most certainly agree with Mr. Shuren's concerns. I instead am proposing another motion instead.
Okay.
I will pass around.
Would you read your motion, please?
I would like to. Move effective September 12th, 2022, to transfer $2 million of the pilot funding from the CNR fund to the general fund to be distributed in equal parts to all residents and homeowners of Mansfield. To all residential homeowners of the town of Mansfield for the purpose of a one-time COVID relief payment. Town council members who would own real property are to be excluded from receiving this payment. Excludes commercial property, personal property, motor vehicles, land and rental properties.
I'll second that.
The motion has been moved and seconded. Would you wish to speak to your motion, Mr. Osberger?
I would. Each and every homeowner suffered from one form of hardship or another, be it isolation, depression, the fallout of quarantining, dealing with death or burial issues, food access, work shortages, essential workers not covered under the state program. In this case here, a person of lesser means gets the same amount of someone that perhaps may be well off. Perhaps some of this funding at some time in the future could go to fill the shortfall from the school lunch program. In our town alone, 12.3% are below the poverty level. 8.8% are on food stamps and SNAP. I would imagine that going forward, with fuel issues coming up this fall, there are going to be many people that are going to be struggling to deal with these issues. According to Point Two Homes, Mansfield demographics show 5,604 households. So what would happen in effect is, of the pilot money, a check to about $356.89 would go to these households.
Coleman, do you wish to second?
Yes. I think this is casts a much wider net and than just town employees, like Mr. Osberger said. We all suffered a great deal. And I think this motion that he has proposed tonight casts a wide net and it helps out many, many people as opposed to a few town employees.
Mr. Shaken?
Thanks. Can I just ask a clarifying question? Could Mr. Osberger explain the math that he just laid out? It looks like there's 485 employees, according to the memo on page 297 of the town and both school districts, of which $194,000 is being divided into a $400 payment for each employee. So can you explain how there would be a $350 payment to each household in Mansfield? I'm assuming there's multiples of that in terms of numbers of residential property.
Well, the site Point Two Homes lists Mansfield demographics at 5,604 households. The money would come from the transfer of the $2 million of the remaining pilot funding from the CNR fund. And then that would in fact get divided up, and that gets you to your end result. So it has nothing to do with the original motion that was put on the floor. This has to do with transferring money from the CNR fund to the pilot funding, and then in turn, distributing that out to the households.
Can I continue, Mayor?
Go ahead.
So this $2 million in the capital non-recurring fund, are those dollars that the council has left in that fund without a use, or are they dollars that the council has already appropriated a use for? And if you don't know the answer, maybe staff could help answer
Mr.
the question.
Aylesworth has his hand up. Mr. Aylesworth?
Yeah, I'm just trying to kind of follow along like everybody here, but I guess I think it's important for the council to know that if we're talking about, which I think we are, when we're talking about pilot funding, we're talking about surplus pilot funding from the fiscal year 22 that ended June 30th. Council will of course recall that over time, I think it's been, a couple, maybe 3 different motions or actions the council has taken to authorize and appropriate those funds to other uses, including road improvements and other things along the line. So there's not, at this time, and in a while, I'll say that there was a $500,000, Charmaine? Okay, roughly $500,000, basically, that was not, after a series of motions that the council acted on, or proposed authorizations that the council acted on, there was about $500,000 left over, and that was essentially what was going to be contributed towards building our fund balance and helping us achieve the council's fund balance policy goal of 17%. So I just want to be very clear that, there's a lot of mechanics, but just specifically if we're talking about nothing, setting aside all other debate or discussion that might be had on this, there is not $2 million of unallocated, unappropriated pilot funds dangling out there.
And we tied up a lot of those loose ends in approving the year-end transfers as part of the motions that were covered in the consent agenda.
Correct.
May I continue?
Yes.
So I think I have enough understanding, at least to vote on this motion. I just want to be clear to sort of repeat what I think was said. So first of all, I don't understand that this motion necessarily does away with the underlying motion to provide pandemic premium pay for town and school district employees. It sounds to me like it's a proposal to appropriate funds to provide a one-time payment to all residents of town, perhaps in addition to or without speaking to the question of bonus pay for town and school employees. But I am under the impression that those funds have already been spent, that the council has already appropriated uses for those dollars, and that the motion does not try to undo that spending, which procedurally would need a motion to reconsider. Anyway, so I have some question about whether the motion is in order and germane, but I will perhaps yield that it is easier to just vote no and move along. The council's already appropriated uses for these funds and has already just tonight approved a deposit into our fund balance of in part what is left. Fund balance is how we save the taxpayers money in the long term, much more substantial money than a one-time payment of $350 or about a quarter of that, which is what's actually available. And so I don't think that this is a smart move, and I support the underlying motion for the reasons that I stated earlier.
Let me clarify for the public one of the things that Mr. Shaken has just said. The amount of money in our fund balance leads to an increase in our bond rating, and an increase in a bond rating means that we get charged lower amounts when we go out to borrow money, and that would therefore have to repay less. So in the long run, by putting this money into the bond fund, we may be reducing taxes by the equivalent of $300, and that's sort of hypothetical, but over a period of time, probably true. Ms. Berthelot, followed by Mr. Osberger.
Go ahead.
No.
So I certainly appreciate my colleague's sentiment with wanting to do more for our community. However, I'm not going to be comfortable voting for a motion like this until it comes to us from the town, because I know that the professionals at the town would have vetted it and made sure that it would pass muster, and that, so it may be something to put on a future agenda as an idea, but until we've actually had the opportunity to have the professionals come to speak to us as to the mechanics of how it would work, and then have an opportunity as a council to decide whether we agree that it's the right way to use the money, I wouldn't be comfortable supporting the motion, so I will not be supporting your motion.
Mr. Osberger.
I was of the impression that the first part of Ryan, $4 million, the first part, the $2 million went to all of the road improvements and all of that, and that there was a balance of the $2 million that got put into the capital non-recurring fund.
Right, so I don't have, we have to revisit agenda packets from many meetings ago, but the total surplus, which was north of $3 million, close to $4 million or thereabouts, maybe north of $4 million, that we received, so the call it $4 million amount, that our actual pilot revenue exceeded our budgeted pilot revenue over time and over a series of proposals that were acted on by the town council. That residual amount, so had the council taken no action, $4 million, call it $4 million, would have become fund balance, because that revenue would have been unappropriated and would have just become fund balance at the end of the year. However, the council acted on a series of recommendations that ultimately drew that surplus, if you will, down to about $500,000. I think just for other, because I think it's relevant here, our town council, our town attorney, council with an S, not a C, is out of the country, and so I haven't been able to confer with him directly, but I want to say this the right way. Because to Councilor Berthelot's point a moment ago about staff vetting, and granted, we haven't had a lot of time to vet this, but I know the question of a tax credit, a tax holiday, some sort of tax relief was brought up before, and staff at this time does not believe that what's being proposed, if I'm understanding this correctly, if you're proposing that these amounts, $350, be administered in terms of a credit against somebody's tax burden. Is that the mechanics of it? Well, let me just say, if that's the case, if that's how this was to be administered, that it would be, basically a discount, a credit, if you will, a reduction in somebody's property tax bill in the amount of $350 or otherwise, we don't think this is legal. This actually can't be done. The council has no authority to do this, and so I think that's probably the biggest stumbling block you're looking at.
Mr. Sherman?
Yeah, it seems to me the way to help residential homeowners is by crafting a budget to assure that taxes are as low as they can possibly be, which has been the effort year after year. Have something put in this point, not a rational way to go, and doesn't to me make any sense.
Mr. Osberger, you've already spoken twice to your motion.
I wanted to reply to Ryan.
Well, you have a question for Mr. Aylesworth
do.
about this?
I
Ask
do.
your question.
So you said that it was illegal to do it as a tax relief, but that's not what I'm proposing. I'm proposing some sort of a check, which wouldn't that be the same thing as what we're proposing in the first motion?
A check to employees
Right, and so.
is much different from a check to residents based on tax payment.
Okay, well, maybe I was led to understand or infer that we were talking about a credit on
No.
taxes because of the reference to homeowners. And of course, homeowners representing a subset of there are renters. There are a lot of people that live in town that aren't homeowners. So that's why I guess I thought we were talking about, and I think that was.
No.
Okay, all right.
No.
All right, are we ready to vote on the motion, or do more people wish to speak? Ms. Jane, I think this calls for a roll call. This is an amendment to the motion, which is already on the floor. Mr. Osberger's motion is to transfer $2 million of pilot funding to be distributed to residential homeowners.
Yes.
No. Sure.
No.
Coleman.
Yes.
Cotton.
No.
Curran.
No.
Again.
No.
Thank you.
The motion fails. The motion remains on the floor to provide, to transfer money from CNR for the purpose of paying an amount of $400 pre-tax per employee for an aggregate of amount of $194,000. Mr. Shuren.
Just a technical question. These funds, as they go to the Board of Ed and Region 19, are transferred to those entities, although mechanically we write the checks here. We are not sending the checks from the town to those people, correct?
In the way I think I understand you to mean the question, the answer is yes. So we do process payroll for all the entities. However, the way this would be treated is the town, the town council would be authorizing the appropriation of a certain sum of money to the respective entities, that each respective entity, their governing body, their school board, would have to then have a separate vote to authorize the expenditure of that money for this purpose. So you as a council are allocating or appropriating a dollar amount consistent with this, basically this cumulative pre-tax amount based on the head count. Obviously, the school district will understand the intent of the town council in doing this and would presumably always respect those wishes. But as you allude to, Councilor Shuren, you're correct. The governing body, town council, authorizes the appropriation. Then there has to be a reciprocated action by the school board to accept and request the administration of these awards. Then it comes back to our staff that actually process the payroll. So it's kind of a boomerang, if you will.
Right, and there's no necessity to say this is what the money has to be spent for?
I don't believe so. I mean, you could certainly amend the motion to reflect that, add additional verbiage if the council's more comfortable doing that.
Mr. Coleman?
I can't support this motion. And it's not really about, I really do appreciate all the hard work that our town employees have and their commitment to being here during the pandemic. My issue is that we're using pilot funding. The town of Mansfield was granted $7.5 million of ARPA funding. The town of Ashford received money, and the town of Willington also received ARPA funding. In the final rule of the ARPA funding, I don't have it in front of me, but it states clearly that you could use the ARPA funding itself for premium pay for town employees who worked during the pandemic and these difficult times. I'm not supporting this motion because we are not using the appropriate funds, the ARPA funds that were allocated for such a thing, and we are pulling the money out of the CNR and using pilot funding. So on that matter, I am not supporting this motion.
Mr. Shaken?
Thank you for the second time. I'm wondering if I could ask Mr. Aylesworth if he could explain, again, I think he explained it back when he originally proposed this, why he thought it was best to use funds this way rather than using ARPA dollars.
So the federal rule, and I think decisions were made to pivot away from rescue plan funding at the time that there was actually an interim final rule. It was probably before the final rule was promulgated, but I think this interpretation still holds in the final rule. But ultimately, the Rescue Plan Act limited the eligibility, if you will, provided a more limited definition, a narrower definition of what constituted an essential worker. And they specifically defined it as employees that worked in public health, public safety, or human services. So school teachers, transfer station attendants, so a wide range of other employees would not be eligible under that narrower definition. So at that time, once that was understood and interpreted that way, and our town attorney was consulted on that as well, that's when, and of course this was quite a few months ago now at this point, but that's why in a subsequent discussion with the town council, essentially it was recommended that the council pivot away from using rescue plan funds for this purpose. And if the council did indeed wish to provide some sort of one-time payment, premium pay to what we define as essential workers, to use a different source of funding to do that was not in any way, that there would not be these prohibitions against a broader definition of employees.
All right, are we ready to vote? Ms. Chain, I think we need to do a roll call vote. We are voting on the original motion on page 298, and that is to appropriate $194,000 to pay pandemic bonus awards to eligible employees for the town and the 2 school districts.
Osberger.
Oh, go for it. No.
Yes.
Bruder.
Yes.
Coleman.
No.
Moran.
Yes.
Curran.
Abstain.
Shaken.
Yes.
All right, the motion has been adopted. Next item on the agenda is, and I do want to say before we move on, that I do appreciate Mr. Osberger's attempt to provide some relief to Mansfield homeowners. I think we all understand that there is almost nobody who has escaped the consequences of this pandemic. And I think that the way that we can, the best we can do is to be the best possible governing body we can be to provide the lowest taxes and the best services over the next couple of years. And I certainly dedicate myself to that, so I would certainly hope that the members of the public understand that this vote does not mean that we don't understand the difficulties that people have faced over the last couple of years. Next item on our agenda is Local Business and Nonprofit Relief Fund Program.
Mayor.
Mr. Shaken.
Hi, I'm here for another agenda motion. We have some guests with us this evening, and some of them are on our payroll, so to speak, and so, but some of them are not. And so I was gonna propose that before we get into these next 2 items, which may also take some time, that we deal with hear from the Commission on Aging to provide their annual report. And so I would move that we amend our agenda to hear the Commission on Aging's annual report now, and then proceed with the rest of the agenda.
Mr. Shaken has moved that we move new business A to right now. Mr. Bruder, seconds. Shall we vote? All those in favor of doing this, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. We have amended the motion to move directly to the Commission on Aging report. So, who is here to present the Commission on Aging report? Please come forward. So if our guests would introduce themselves and explain their relationship to the commission, and then we will proceed.
Okay. I'll start by introducing myself, and then we'll introduce the other two as we go. I'm John Reeson. I'm the current chair of the Commission on Aging. And we really appreciate not only your taking the time to put us in the agenda, but also to move us up a little bit. Some of us are old and past our bedtime.
Some of us sympathize.
Just to pick part of the charge to the commission, commissions shall advise the town council, the town manager, and the director of human services as to the needs and concerns of the senior citizens of the town of Mansfield. So our presentation is to help address that challenge. Most of you are familiar that percentage of seniors is increasing. One study from the Census Bureau indicated a projection that in 2000, the percentage of seniors in the state population was about 14%. It's projected to increase. Okay. It's projected to increase to 21% by the year 30. So the problem is not going away. There's a huge number of concerns for senior citizens. The commission has chosen 3 areas that we would suggest the council pay particular attention to, while not ignoring all the others. Those 3 areas are aging in community, transportation for seniors, and the Mansfield Senior Center. The first section, aging in community, will be taken by Martina Wharton. She's the vice chairman, and she's passionate about senior housing.
You're going to click it. Okay. Figure this out. Some seniors are able to age in place, i.e. living in long-term in their home. For others, a better opportunity might be aging in the community, i.e. moving to housing within the community that is more size-appropriate, senior-friendly, and which may have assisted living services like the bus service, meal availability, and nursing services. Okay, the commission feels that there is a need for more planning for age-related housing in the town of Mansfield. We're not talking about affordable housing. What we are talking about is age-related housing, like the housing at Juniper Hill Village, because many seniors cannot afford affordable housing. So there is a difference, and the commission wants people to realize the difference between affordable housing and affordable age-related housing. Summary of Mansfield senior housing in Mansfield. Rights Way, which in its inception had many seniors living there, has transitioned to a different housing model. A few seniors have even moved from Rights Way and are living at Juniper Hill Village. A few more have moved elsewhere. Rolling Hills has pricier units have been brought in, and many seniors living at Rolling Hills currently living there fear that they will have to move due to higher park fees. Glen Ridge, we have heard that due to aging units, Glen Ridge is replacing and upgrading many of their units. The cost of this will be passed on to everyone living there. The concern is that seniors living on a fixed income will have a difficult time paying a mortgage and/or higher condo fees. Juniper Hill Village is where I live. The facilities were built with HUD funds. There is currently a long waiting list for seniors to come into Juniper Hill Village. We do not have any other funding like that in the town of Mansfield. Therefore, a lot of seniors leave the town. Okay. Summary. New facilities development. The town's recent facilities development study stated that one of the potential designs would include or could include 20 units of restricted senior housing at the renovated Goodwin School site. While this is a positive step, we feel that this number is woefully inadequate. 20 units of affordable senior housing is not adequate. Seniors in the town of Mansfield need housing that is not deemed affordable housing because it meets a particular formula. This has the potential to price seniors on a fixed income out of the market. Seniors need housing that seniors can afford to live in, and at this point in time, some of the seniors in the town of Mansfield are being priced out of the market. And I just want to mention here, before Will takes over, I moved to Mansfield in 1968 as undergraduate married students after the birth of our first daughter. We were a family of 3. We had another daughter in 1971. We decided to make Storrs our home because of the friends that we made here, the diversity of the community, and the programs at Yukon that we took advantage of. Both of our daughters graduated from E.O. Smith in the 1980s. I built my house here in the spring of 1985. In 2009, I put my house on the market. It sold quickly. I applied for housing at Juniper Hill Village and was told that there was a waiting list of 2 years. Subsequently, I was fortunate enough to move in with friends in Mansfield Depot for those 2 years. If I had not been able to go to Mansfield Depot, I would have left Mansfield, which is something I did not want to do. I wanted to live in Storrs. Except for a brief hiatus, I have lived in Mansfield since that time. I have lived at Juniper Hill Village for the past 10 years. Storrs is my home. Seniors should not have to move to other towns because there is not enough housing available.
Next, we have Will Beagle, who'll talk about transportation. Will has been a long-term chair of the Commission on Aging. I think he has a longer term than any other chairman that we've had. He's on the board of directors for the WRTD. This is a relatively recent event, and it's been very beneficial that someone from the commission was involved with the WRTD board. So we're grateful for that.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. Mansfield is a great town to live in, if you can drive. We continue to hear horror stories of seniors who no longer are able to drive and the difficulty they have in getting to medical and other appointments. Despite WRTD making some improvements and the senior center providing volunteer drivers, much remains to be done to allow our Mansfield seniors who cannot drive the reliability to get to their activities and medical appointments.
Okay. We are very encouraged, the commission is very encouraged by the recent facility study that the town of Mansfield authorized. The commission wholeheartedly endorses putting a very high priority on replacing the old senior center building. It is inadequate, hard to maintain, and it's prohibitively expensive to renovate. The commission feels strongly that the commission, town citizenry, and the senior center staff all should have early and continuous input into the design process. We submitted a feedback for the facilities design initial phase, and our conclusion was that any of the proposed sites was workable. But the devil is in the detail. Continuous input is important. We very much appreciate the opportunity to present. We would be happy to set up a meeting for the town council to tour our current senior facilities, if you have not done that. And we could also discuss any other areas of concern for seniors. Questions?
I myself would like to invite the entire council to one of our Commission on Aging meetings. I think that would be very beneficial for all of you.
Thank you. I have to tell you, we have a hard enough time getting a quorum for council meetings. We've been trying to set up a goal-setting meeting for months now. But I certainly encourage individual members of the council to attend. And I thank you very much for the invitation and for the presentation. I think you will find when we do the facilities presentation that your concerns have been heard. Without giving away any secrets, I feel fairly certain that the facilities presentation will include some very significant improvements in senior facilities. But I don't want to give away the store. Do council members have questions for the Commission on Aging? Mr. Coleman, followed by Ms. Berthelot. Did you have your hand up? Oh, okay.
Thank you for your presentation tonight and bringing your concerns about age-restricted housing. I'm hoping that we can do something with the housing stock here that will help seniors. Age restriction is a good way to go, I think. I did have the opportunity to tour the senior center, and quite frankly, I'm embarrassed of it. I'm not only embarrassed, it's not even ADA compliant. It's quite shocking. The condition of the building, and I hear your concerns.
Thank you.
Other members of the council wish to comment? Ms. Berthelot?
I just want to thank you so much for doing this, and all of your points are clearly excellent, and I know we'll be doing our strategic planning soon, and I know that we'll be thinking about what you've brought to us. Transportation and housing, they go hand in hand, and we've got to get it right, so thank you.
And I'd also like to thank you for your time doing this work. It is an extremely important contribution to the leadership in the community, and I just want you to know how valued you are by the council. Mr. Bruder.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to also express my gratitude for the time that the Commission of Aging took to put together these points and the presentation. I'm fully in favor of definitely addressing the transportation needs in Mansfield. I agree. As somebody who is, somebody I love taking the bus to work and to anywhere else I can, and it's very difficult to do so. So hopefully, that's something that we as a town can address. And I also support the idea of us coming together as a group to meet with the Commission on Aging, just so that we can make sure that, at least for me, I appreciate the direct input from the people who have a direct line into what would be required or what is being requested.
Mr. Sherman?
Yeah, just not that you would have it off the top of your head, but do you have data on the number of seniors who live with other family members, who live alone, or who are part of a couple, and they may have different sets of needs and different sets of concerns? Go ahead.
I don't think at this time we have that information, but that's something we could look into.
You know, the planning and zoning changed the rules, and the state did also, to allow ADUs, accessory dwelling units, which mean housing primarily for seniors on land already occupied by a residence. It's usually referred to as in-law housing, and I'm wondering, I have two questions. Have you seen any real change in housing because of the additions of in-law housing? And my second question has to do with transportation. A number of years ago, the council fought pretty hard to get the volunteer driver program established, and I'm wondering how the commission sees its success. So I've got two questions. One of them is on ADUs, and the other is on the volunteer driver situation.
Well, the volunteer driver is working real well. The WRTD has I have a lot of challenges there. They don't seem to want to listen to me. I have the only thing that I did accomplish is I got a bus stop so that the people at Juniper Hill can get on the bus and go up to Juniper Hill and get on the bus at Juniper Hill and stop at the senior center so they can use that as a way to get to the senior center. That's about the only inroads I have made into the last 3 years I've been on that thing. The driver program works very well, okay? We do need another driver, and I think it's very workable between Dial-A-Ride and the volunteer drivers. I think that it's something that is being worked on. We need another driver, I believe. But again, we need a whole bunch of other people in town, from what I hear. We're being short-staffed all the way around. But I think it's workable, and I think it will be workable. Your question about the in-laws, I have not heard of anything myself personally about anybody doing.
Thank you. Any other council questions? All right, well, thank you very much for this report, and stay tuned.
Thank you.
All right, then let's go back to the original order of our agenda. So we will return to the Local Business and Nonprofit Relief Fund. Mr. Aylesworth.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I was just trying to communicate the need for a slight revote on an earlier motion, but we can address that later in the meeting. Okay. So the council previously authorized or approved a proposal that staff presented to appropriate $370,000 of American Rescue Plan funds for the purpose of funding a local business relief or local business assistance program. Back in early summer, I want to say the original deadline was July 8th, so I think we advertised for about a month. We received over 20 applications for funding, and the award amounts could be as high as $10,000. We anticipated that most of the awards would be in the $2,500 to $5,000 range. Ultimately, there was $158,500 worth of awards that were administered based on the feedback that an advisory group, as well as the Mansfield Downtown Partnership, and big thanks again to Cynthia Van Zelm and her staff, who reviewed all the applications and helped with all the outreach around this. There was $158,500 that was expended. So that left a remainder of $211,500 that was not appropriated from the original, or was not administered from the original $370,000. So we've been discussing now, since the conclusion of this latest round of review, the options for those unappropriated funds or unexpended funds. And staff at this time would like to recommend to the council basically to authorize around 2 of this program with one wrinkle. All businesses, all types of businesses that were eligible the first round would be eligible for the second round. So in that sense, everybody who was eligible would still be eligible. We are proposing to broaden the eligibility pool, if you will, to include nonprofit organizations. Nonprofits were, I guess you could say, intentionally set aside the first go-round because we were contemplating, as the council knows, separate streams of funding to support nonprofit work. However, one of the things we heard from several nonprofit organizations when the first round of, when the program was first rolled out, was their, I don't want to say displeasure, but they certainly wish that they had been eligible to apply. And so it's staff's recommendation that we go back out. You authorize a second round that would cast a wider net, include nonprofits to apply, and then to the extent that after the second round, there's still any residual funds, that those would go back into the broader pool of unencumbered, if you will, rescue plan funds for the council to decide how to reappropriate for basically an entire unrelated purpose at that point. So that's what I and Cynthia Van Zelm, the Executive Director of the Downtown Partnership, are recommending. Happy to entertain any questions the council has on that.
We have a motion on page 304. Would somebody put the motion on the floor, please? Ms. Berthelot?
Move to authorize the town manager to move forward with the implementation of the local business and nonprofit relief fund program using ARPA funds as presented.
There's second? Mr. Shuren seconds. So basically, this is a motion to reopen the program to existing businesses and also to add nonprofits. Ms. Berthelot, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Clearly, this goes back to earlier issues of the evening and wanting to cast a net as wide as we can in terms of using the in this case, the actual ARPA funds to mitigate circumstances caused by COVID. Obviously, this is a great idea, and we want to get as many people involved as possible, as many businesses involved. Our not-for-profits are of great value to the larger community for the work that they do, and obviously, it's a really good idea to have them involved in this program.
Is there anybody else wish to speak to the motion? Mr. Coleman?
I have a question for the town manager. About how many nonprofits do we have in town? Do you have a number on that?
I've heard different estimates provided, so I do not have an accurate head count on nonprofits.
Okay.
Quite a few entities, large and small, qualify as nonprofits, so it's probably a much larger number than you'd think off the top of your head.
the requirements for hardship, in order to get the funding, are they different for nonprofits? Or how do they actually show financial hardship?
So, I mean, we rolled out in this, it's part of the packet, a revised policy document, if you will, so you can see what the eligibility criteria are. I mean, the idea is that when you think about things like making payroll, right? That was one of the things that was an eligible category for for-profit businesses. So if they had to lay people off, if they were behind on their payroll, this would be an eligible use of those funds. And so nonprofits were impacted in the same way, to use that as an example, making payroll expenses or other operating costs.
And are the caps going to be the same?
We're proposing that the same dollar thresholds
Okay.
apply. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, are we ready to vote? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Adopted. Mr. Shaken, did you vote? Adopted unanimously. Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is the facilities plan.
And 1 second, can you hear me now?
Was that you, Mr.
Yes.
Shaken?
I was trying to abstain from that vote.
You were trying to abstain. Oh, right, of course. Yes, so it was unanimous for those who are voting. Mr. Shaken abstains. All right, this is the exciting part of the agenda. Mr. Aylesworth, would you introduce?
Sure. So before I activate the screen share and turn the presentation over to Richard Sipic from TSKP Studios, I know I provided the council, this sort of basic information in the past when Richard came. Is it April now? It's been that long? Yeah, about half a year, or almost. But just to kind of refresh the council's memory, council authorized the town to move forward with a municipal facilities needs assessment study. The project commenced in October after a competitive selection process. We had a number of firms submit proposals in response to an RFP. TSKP Studios was ultimately awarded the contract. TSKP Studios has been working with the town, as the council knows, on the Mansfield Elementary School project as well. So this needs assessment, though, unlike past needs assessments that focused primarily, if not exclusively, on building condition assessment, this focused primarily, first and foremost, on the programmatic use, sort of operation needs assessment. How well are our existing facilities meeting the needs of the municipal departments and organizations that are using them, and to what extent can our existing spaces be made to meet our existing needs, current needs, and projected future needs? And if they're not meeting needs or not able to meet future needs, what alternatives might we be needing to seriously consider in order to get us where we need to be now and into the future? And so we've been working for the better part of a year now with TSKP, myself and department heads, and as you heard from the Council Commission on Aging earlier, Richard's been trying to get feedback from various stakeholders. Can't stress this enough, this really is the beginning of the beginning. What you're going to hear tonight from TSKP is not recommendations in the way you normally think of recommendations, is in pursue this particular proposal. It's really a suite of options that the council may consider moving forward with. So we really tried to look at all the different possibilities. TSKP has been a great consulting firm to work with. I found them really responsive to their client needs. The town, in this case, really receptive to the feedback that town staff and other stakeholders have provided. And this is a work in progress, and I think that'll come across in Richard's presentation. But again, just want to stress to the council that there's no action tonight other than for you to receive this information, begin to digest it, because this is the beginning of a conversation that's going to involve a tremendous amount of community and stakeholder engagement in the coming months. So without any further ado, I'll walk over the keyboard and the the mouse to Richard so he can drive this presentation.
I will point out that I can see Mr. Bruder and Mr. Shaken on the screen, but if there's anybody else who wishes, who is virtual, who wishes to catch my attention, you're going to have to shout out or do something to make yourself heard. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. It's been a while. Ryan is right. The last time I appeared before this council to discuss this subject was back in April. Since that time, we've gone through the facilities again, met with department heads, we've met with different folks who work out of these facilities. I personally have been through all of the facilities. I put my eyes on all of the features in those facilities. I studied the old plans that you have on file, and I brought with me people from my office to help me verify information, and I also brought consultants, specifically CMTA, who's a mechanical engineer, to look at the mechanical systems in the buildings. And I also brought along CHA, who's a civil engineer, as well as a cost estimator. When we met with you in April, we didn't have any budget figures. And that's certainly a factor when you look at these kinds of facility studies. CHA has now helped me put together some budget numbers. So Ryan is handing out a copy of the slides that I'm going to be showing you this evening. And hopefully, he will also be distributing the easier to read, larger version of the cost figures that you'll see in this packet. So my presentation is divided into 4 parts. Figure this out. Reviewing the existing conditions and deficiencies, examining some alternatives, sharing with you some budget analysis, and then a discussion about next steps. We'll start with reviewing existing conditions. So I shared this chart, a version of this chart with the town council previously. It lists a total of 13 facilities that we looked at. Actually, when we were hired to look at facilities, we were told to look at 12 facilities in town. And the first question I asked is, why these 12? And I was told, well, these were deemed to be the most needy of the facilities. So I said, okay, fine, we can continue. And then in the course of examining the facilities, I ended up adding a 13th. So that's why the bottom line is in red. That's an additional facilities that doesn't exist yet. Still to be determined whether that's something that needs to be done. And that's a new public safety facility. This summary chart shows you the square footage of each of your facilities that's on the list, the amount of acreage, whether you have public water or whether you have well water, whether you have public sewer, or whether you have a septic system. And this is important information, which I'll get into a little bit later for some of the facilities. Okay, let's start first with number 1 on the list, which is the municipal building. I want to point out that the numbers of those facilities were just the numbers that we started with. They do not indicate a priority of any sort. That's something that needs to be discussed further amongst townsfolk. So you know that the existing town hall was formerly a school. It's a 1-story building located on a prominent site right in the center of Mansfield. It's located right here where I'm wiggling the cursor. This is a U-shaped building on your campus, your municipal campus. That's one lot that I've outlined in orange here. There's a second lot here that was acquired from Region 19. I'm thinking about 15 years ago, roughly. We were able to find one map that showed that that lot was added to your holdings for the purpose of, I believe, building that community center that exists there. And you have added other features there as well. You have a skate park, you have some playgrounds that are through these trees. And I know you're thinking about doing further expansion. I want to point out that this lot property line runs right through the tennis courts here. It turned out I was invited to attend a meeting at E.O. Smith because there was we wanted to get some sense of, as a neighbor, a significant neighbor, what collaborative efforts may present themselves or collaborative opportunities may present themselves. And so they acknowledge the fact that this property line goes through the tennis courts, but they said also there may be some easements that we should be careful about. And that's something that should be studied further. Should be one of the sites that you want to look at. I heard Ryan mentioned a meeting with Yukon. I think your meeting was probably about the residential buildings across the street. If that's developed, that's another item that should be taken into account when you're planning this, whether you stay here or what you do with this facility. This is an aerial view of your existing conditions. This is the entrance into the parking lot. I'm sure you're very familiar with it. It's not too far from Storrs Center. So what we found was a building of roughly 27,000 square feet, one story. This layout shows the departments that's existing in the town hall. We already see departments already starting to spread out from one area to another area of the building because more spaces needed. So for example, the planning department also has, in addition to the area here in gray, there's an additional planning office a little remote. The Eastern Highlands Health District has captured some space across the hallway. There is a number of inadequate spaces here, particularly in conference rooms. Conference room C, I think it is, which is actually formerly a hallway and a vestibule that was captured and turned into a conference room. Yeah, it does. Not accessible, obviously. And then we have the police or the trooper location here. This is an awkward place to put a trooper facility, especially since you have people who come to see the police. They walk through the town hall. It's not a good public path to take if you're going to visit the police department. You may have confidential issues going on. That it's not a good arrangement. And then you have youth services here, which actually serves other functions in town. So we have some serious concerns about how this building will function in the future. It does have mechanical needs. It does need improvements. Our engineers went through it, and you can see that it's really a mixture of HVAC systems. There's no mechanical ventilation. People rely a lot on windows to get ventilation into the facility. It needs to be addressed. We did take a stab at examining, and I apologize that this is shifted. I wanted to get everything on one page, but it's basically 2 columns. I wanted to get a sense of how much space may be needed. So we have a column labeled current. This is an inventory of all of the current offices and square footages you have. And as you can see, the total is 27,363 square feet. That includes the police department, the fire marshal's office, fire chief's office, and youth services, which I'm questioning why they are in this facility. If you take those components out, you have a total of 23,923 square feet of office use. I am projecting that you really need about 34,000 square feet in order to adequately serve the needs of the town hall facilities. And then on top of that, you could add police, fire marshal, fire chief, and youth services, assuming that they go into this facility again or continue to stay in the facility and not find another home, making the total of about 39,000 square feet. Moving on to facilities 2 through 5. These are all located at your DPW site. We did go through each of the buildings, and the buildings that I think could be saved, that probably are fine, are the cold storage building. This is a building for vehicle storage, the salt shed, and some of the areas around here. But the other garage buildings, I'll get into that in a minute, really cannot serve you. They don't serve you well right now, and they probably couldn't serve you in long term. This facility includes the animal shelter, which is this very small rectangle located here. Okay, we did go through all the buildings. As I reported last time, one of the issues in this building is traffic safety. You have vehicles driving into the garages and then backing out. It's not an ideal situation. The best thing to do is for a vehicle to drive through and enter on the opposite, or exit on the opposite side. Make matters worse, in the town garage, you have inserted aisles within the garage so that you could park all your vehicles there, but you did not add garage doors. So what you, as you can see by this diagram, this little rectangle here, the broken rectangle, represents the location of the garage door. So a vehicle that comes in here has to scoot to the right to get into that aisle, or swing to the left to get into this aisle. And somehow they managed to do it, but it's not a pleasant scene. I videotaped it once, and it was they're very talented guys, these guys in these garages, but it is not the safest arrangement. You really should have a garage bay that has a door, and ideally a garage door on the opposite side as well. The same thing for the grounds building. The grounds building is mostly the maintenance of mowers, that kinds of grounds of equipment. Here in the main garage, you have similar kind of situation. You have a maintenance bay, and then you have stacked, one on top of another, office areas, staff areas, and then you have sleeping area and lounge on the upper level. This is where drivers, if they're doing 24-hour duty like they would in a storm, this is a place where they could sleep. It's a very awkward configuration. It's not handicapped accessible. Are drivers required to be handicapped accessible? It is a requirement of employees, if you have more than 25 employees, to provide facilities that are handicapped accessible. Again, mechanical inspection by engineers, similar kinds of issues. And the animal shelter is tiny. It's only 515 square feet. It was built in 1975. That's 47 years ago. It's very cheaply built, poor insulation, poor mechanical systems. It's really time to upgrade this building. You have a facility called the maintenance shop. This is actually in leased space at Depot campus. You don't own that building. You have the luxury of occupying that building for very little rent. So maybe you should stay there. On the other hand, Yukon is expanding, looking for other uses potentially on the Depot campus. So my recommendation would be to think about maybe another place eventually. It's full of stuff. It's referred to as the town's attic. Anytime a department doesn't know what to do with something, it ends up in this facility. But I'm not sure you need that big a facility. This is what it looks like. And within this building, you have some functional spaces such as the maintenance shop, plumbing, mechanical, maintenance people work here, a maintenance shop, which is a carpentry shop. And then we also have owners' archives and records, which does not have any kind of temperature or humidity control. Well, maybe temperature, but definitely not ventilation or humidity control. Yes, sir. Yeah, that's what it looks like. And the mechanical system has spent its useful life. Facility number 7 is Goodwin School. This has opportunity for other uses in the future when it's no longer a school. Right now, it's just classroom configuration. It's currently functioning as a school, but that's not its future. Mechanical systems, there are some issues. Again, it's not ventilated mechanically. It's reliant on windows, no fire protection. That means a sprinkler system. And Vinton School, that's facility number 8, similar situation. It's functioning as a classroom right now, but whether it should continue to function as a classroom when the new building is built, that's not the plan. You need to find another use for it. Yes.
I have a question about these two school buildings. When we were considering whether or not to move to create a single consolidated school, one of the concerns was that these buildings are really not safe any longer. And I'm wondering, is there enough there to convert them, or should we really be thinking about tearing them down? Every time we think about another use for it, I keep thinking about all of the problems, and I'm not even sure that you have a quick answer for this one, but I've been worried about this all along.
Sure. So you should be thinking about both. One scenario is you tear them down, dispose of the property, make it an opportunity for development for another kind of use. Another possibility is to put a lot of money into it and convert it into another use. Both of those are achievable. I think I fall more on the put another use, demolish, and I'll show you one opportunity, which is to develop it into housing lots. That's a possibility. Another possibility is housing, perhaps even senior housing. But then you have to invest money into it. So are they salvageable? Yeah, they're salvageable. It just will take some money.
Just an anecdotal statement with regard to that. When Goodwin School, or formerly Northwest, was being built, it was just a shell. And my grandfather walked through there with my mother. He was one of the head plumbers at Yukon, and his comments, my mother told me, were, they are overbuilding these buildings. They will be here for 100 years. That was his opinion, and he pretty much had a good handle on construction and building. But as the time, he said the materials that they were using, the way they were doing the girders, the way they were building the infrastructure, he said they were going to be here for 100 years. And of course, they were built in the late 50s. We got a long ways to go.
They are salvageable. I think where they need attention are in the windows, the roof, insulation, mechanical systems.
Well, I know they just replaced the windows not too long ago, so
Okay.
they're not that old. But anyway.
Okay. Thank you. You have 3 fire stations. This is one of them, Fire Station 107. It's located on Stafford Road. It is a split-level arrangement on a very tiny lot. There's no room for expansion. And we have had discussions with the fire chief about going from a 3-station model to a 2-station model. This station 107 and I think 207, there's not enough room to expand them to go to a 2-station model. You need a site that's big enough to accommodate a new station. This is what I mean by a split level. They have apparatus rooms or the apparatus bays on both levels. There's a multipurpose room here as well, which could have some value for other uses. This is Fire Station 207. This is near the Four Corners area of town. Again, it's a small station. It has apparatus room here. It's one story. And mostly it's used for storage of apparatus. This is Station 307. This is the station that is in the best condition. It's still functioning well. I think that if you go to a two-station model, this is the station that you should save for that two-station model. It's a split level. The apparatus comes in on the upper bay. There is a lower level, but the lower level is for a gymnasium, fitness room, that kind of function. Okay, let's talk about the existing senior center. That's facility number 12. It's about, I think it's about 9,500 square feet. It's on a tight site, as you can see. It's one story. It is really an odd collection of rooms. It's, as someone pointed out earlier, I can't remember who it was, it's not fully accessible. And it is not that well built. It was been added onto and added onto. Does not have adequate ventilation as well. Okay, let's talk about some alternatives that we looked at for each of these facilities. Starting with facility number 1, the town hall. So how could you upgrade this facility? You could certainly renovate it. You could certainly add on to it, and we looked at all of that. You could, if you renovate it, you would have to renovate it in phases. You'd have to find a place to put people as you work your way around the building and do renovation work. It's something that's done very often in renovation work, but you should then plan to place somewhere on the site, and I think ideally at the front of the site, perhaps in this area, temporary building for scenario 1A. I'll talk about what the scenarios are a little later when we get into the budgeting. Or you can build an addition here, and that becomes your expansion, but it also becomes your phasing or your swing space. So if you were to build an addition in this area, you could move people into that addition as you now start to renovate other parts of the building. That would be scenario 1C. Scenario 1B would be to relocate the offices to the Goodwin School temporarily, one move out, and then do all of the renovation, and then one move back. Still yet another possibility for the municipal building is to build a new municipal building immediately adjacent to the existing one. So you have here in a brown color a potential location for a new building. That would have to be done in phases, and the way I imagine that would happen is we would build an L-shaped configuration for the building while the existing U-shaped building remains in place. And then once that building is demolished, the existing building is demolished, then you could continue with phase 2. This footprint represents a 2-story new municipal building as well as other kinds of uses. This could be a mixed-use facility. So we've talked about the possibility of having tenant space. It could be, for instance, medical office space, perhaps some business space, or perhaps other use, perhaps even educational space. I know that when we met with E.O. Smith, they were very interested. They have an educational program that they call their STAR program, which is an outreach program for students who are postgraduate students, who are special needs students that need some connection to business opportunities. They would take classes here, and they would participate in some trade or skill. So that's other possibilities for the mixed use. The benefit of building a multi-use, mixed-use facility is that you have built-in expansion. or space where you have some wiggle room. So for instance, you could locate your new police and fire headquarters located here, and then you could have them there, and then vacate them, and then convert that into business use, should you find another space for the police and fire. Expanding further, once you have the U-shaped existing building removed, now you have more area for development. So candidates for additional uses on this site would be a new senior center. And we think that this would be the ideal location immediately adjacent to your community center, because there could be some synergy there. There could be some shared functions. And then there also could be additional expansion as well, including parking. Parking located here. Yes, sir.
With all of that roof line and parking area, would you be concerned with all the water runoff that would end up in the swamp right behind the apartments across the street? There's a fragile ecosystem back there.
I would be concerned, but that's something that needs to be engineered. That
Right.
wasn't part of this study, but that would have to be definitely, if this is something that the community wanted to look at, the town council wanted to look at, that absolutely has to be part of that kind of study. This is placed in this location and then with structure in front of it so that it wouldn't look like a parking garage from Storrs Road. It would look like a regular building. We also would propose to create a connection from Storrs Road to the backs of these buildings so that all of these buildings can be served by this service drive. Looking at this even further, it's possible to even add senior housing in this location. It would be flats up above, floors 3 through 5, for example. Okay, facilities 2 through 5. We believe that what's necessary here is reconstruction of some of the buildings here, most of the buildings here. The only one that we would save is the cold storage building here. There's a fueling station here, that would stay, obviously, and then there's the salt shed. That would stay as well. And this is how they would look. We would have the main garage, the large garage. There would be service bays next to it, storage for maintenance of those vehicles. There would be a small garage. This would be for the grounds functions, for example. There would be a new garage for Board of Ed facilities, Board of Ed vehicles, a new animal shelter, and a 2-story DPW building. 2 stories would allow you the ability to bring your maintenance facility, which is in the depot campus, over in this location. And that could be on one floor, let's say the lower floor, and then the upper floor could be DPW administrative and staff space. Now, this part of the site slopes, so it's possible to do a lower level maintenance facility, an upper level admin facility, and not have a stair connecting or an elevator connecting both levels, because the site slopes down. And you could create a drive all the way around to serve all of these facilities. We checked the square footage requirements. We actually got a list of all of the vehicles that need to be stored. There would be drive-through bays. This is a whole listing of your vehicles. And of the existing facilities, we'd, as I say, would keep the unheated building. We would remove the other buildings to make way for these.
When you talk about cold storage, you mean it's not heated, it's not refrigerated?
It's not heated. Yes, thanks for that clarification.
Thank you.
It's, the other buildings are heated. They have warehouse type heaters. They have suspended heaters from up above. The state of the art for these kinds of vehicle garages, and we went to visit one, is it Willington? or Woodstock.
Woodstock.
Woodstock. We visited one in Woodstock. They have they expanded their maintenance facilities. It was a good example of what is done today. It's a drive-through garage. They have heated garage floors, and it's not a luxury. It's actually, if you're standing on a cold concrete floor maintaining vehicles all day, it really is debilitating. So even having a low temperature increase makes a big improvement for staff working on vehicles all day long. So the maintenance shop, I mentioned, we are talking about maybe moving to the DPW campus eventually. Who knows how long you're going to have that ideal rental situation. I think you pay $1 a year or something like that. Very little money. And then we have the Goodwin School. Goodwin could be converted into housing. This shows one-bedroom configurations. We have a total of 21 bedrooms in this kind of configuration. You could also create community space within this building in addition to the bedrooms, or you could do 2-bedroom configurations. This would be only 14 rather than 20. So we did look at that potential. Vinton, here it's at the southern end of town. One possibility is you demolish the building, make it available for single-family residential development. This diagram represents a total of 14 lots could be created here. These lot sizes would be comparable to what's required in the zoning in this area. Although we were told, well, you should wait until we finish a study for this because there could be other uses that would be beneficial, not only for this area, but also some of the surrounding area. That brings us to Fire Station 207. We think that this should be looked at in more detail. It is potential wash bay could be added to this facility. It's a good location. This has sewer in the street. It has public water, so you don't have to worry about the runoff or the contamination. And I think this would be a good facility for a wash bay. It would be a wash bay that could serve all the town vehicles. Right now, DPW has an outdoor washing facility at the DPW facility. It's just not a good situation. You have water running off into the ground. It's outdoors, so you can't do it properly in the wintertime. So that brings us to the senior center. Back to the senior center. This could be, so you saw in the earlier slides the concept of moving the senior center to the municipal campus and making that an expansion of the community center where you could have some shared facilities. So then what happens to the site? You could very easily turn that into housing. I'll get back to this slide in a minute. So this diagram represents one-story housing. It could be very similar to the housing that it is next to, so it would be compatible. So you could sell this property to a developer to do some housing. Let's go back to this chart for a minute. So this represents my assessment of what the space needs are. Remember, I mentioned earlier that the existing senior center is about 9,500 square feet. By this chart, you can see that my recommendation is 25,000 square feet. So the senior center would be more than doubled what you currently have. And it would have administrative areas, activity spaces, such as a large events room with a proper kitchen, cafe. And that could serve people who are using the community center as well as the people who are using the municipal center as well. Other community spaces, we had a meeting with the arts community. They're very interested in having space. This could be a good synergy with their uses as well, with gallery space. Classroom space, which also serves the seniors, could serve the arts community. And then Human Services Department. Remember I said you have youth services in the old town hall? This could be located in the senior center because it would be a nice family outreach, and it works very well with seniors and youth programs. Okay, that brings,
I understand that there's a real movement among senior programming to merge seniors and community centers so there isn't the isolation
right.
that sometimes occurs.
That brings us to the last item, which is 13. So we really think you need a new fire station. If you're going to go to a two-station model, you should build new, and probably in the Four Corners part of town, the north part of town. I think that would be supported by the fire response time that you need in order to serve the community. And you should also consider then combining that with a new police facility. I don't know what the future is for the police services in town. Right now, you have state troopers here as resident police. But at some point, you might want to look at adding a municipal police department here. That's maybe in the future. But if you're going to be looking for a site, and we have not identified a site, such a public safety facility, but if you were going to look for a site, you should look for probably about 5 acres. This diagram represents 3.7 acres. Again, it's, if you're going to find a site, the odds of finding a perfectly rectangular level site are pretty slim. Odds are it probably have some slope to it, so you're going to have to find a larger site to accommodate this kind of a facility. I did do an analysis of square footage. This shows common areas, because some of the spaces could be shared between police and fire. It has fire department spaces and police department spaces. So the total there, I think, is 21,600. And here's how it could potentially be configured. The yellow areas represent shared spaces, including a community room, which also could serve as an emergency operations center. Day room could be shared, a fitness center could be shared, conference areas, lobby, and so on. And then the police department would be in blue, obviously, with a police garage, with a sally port to bring prisoners in a secure manner. And the red or pink, in this case, would be fire department spaces. And on a site, if it were 5 acres or so, you could also consider the animal shelter located here. Animal control is a public safety function, so if you find the appropriate site, it could even include a new animal shelter on this site. Although I will tell you, the site of the existing animal shelter is good. It's adjacent to walking trails. Volunteers come in, they take the animals out for a walk. That's very convenient. It's also remote from any residential neighbors, and so keeping it where it is not a bad idea either. It just needs to be replaced, in my opinion.
Mr. Shaken, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just about this design specifically, have you sort of looked at, we don't have a number of these police functions right now, and we wouldn't have them as long as we have state troopers. So did you talk with the trooper's office about what their space needs might be, given, we use the Sally Port at the Yukon Police Department if there's a prisoner that can't be brought to Troop C in Tolland. I think Tolland, the troop in Tolland manages the firearm storage.
Right.
They don't need it. There isn't a garage, and I can't see the details of all of these rooms, but I certainly think a little corner office at the town hall is probably not enough space for 7 or 8 troopers to share. But this seems like, and a secure lot with an impound also seems like a substantial amount of space for what our status quo is, even if that status quo increased to 10 or 12 troopers as the population of the town increases.
Right. So do you have to do such a large facility? Probably not today, probably not next year. You should think about that, though, when you are acquiring property, so that in the future you could have a facility that has some shared use. That's my only advice here. Could you work with an expansion of the police facility in the town hall? Yeah, probably, if they continue to have the Sally Port function elsewhere, if they had vehicle storage elsewhere, for example. But you have to at least reconfigure your police functions in the town hall to allow for confidential communication and confidential access. Does this police facility have to be this big? No, it can certainly be scaled back. But I wanted to paint a portrait of what is achievable, what maybe you should be thinking about. You can certainly scale back.
And then a second question. I appreciate, and I think it's necessary for the second fire facility to be in the Four Corners area, given that 307 will be the station, it's the newest station, it'll be the one that stays. But and so therefore, you couldn't co-locate it, like, for example, on our existing Public Works site. Did you look into then sort of co-locating all of those, call them big vehicle functions, if you will, onto this site, sort of move our Public Works facility entirely into a larger complex in the Four Corners area that might have access to public water and sewer? I'm struck by the fact that we've got 12 or 13 not only different buildings that all need work, but like different properties. And if we're going to undertake large construction projects in the near future, which is your recommendation and something the council has known for a long time we need to do, it makes sense to me that we consolidate how many different places in town we own and have to maintain and build new. So I'm curious if there would be a site that could accommodate both a new public safety facility and Public Works maintenance animal shelter on one location.
We have not done that. We have not looked at a site that could consolidate all of those functions. But that's perhaps the next step.
I just want to chime in that one of the challenges with doing that, if you could imagine finding the right parcel or a couple of parcels that you could kind of string together to do that, one of the challenges that I'm sure, John Carrington would point to if he were here, is that right now, as it happens, by chance or very strategic design, our DPW facility happens to fall very close to the exact geographic center of towns when it comes to the services that DPW provides and everywhere it needs to go in terms of geographic coverage. Being centrally located is highly advantageous. Now, that's a different calculation, though, clearly, than if you're trying to site a public safety facility like a fire station. If you're keeping a station and trying to figure out, okay, this station lends itself well to geographic coverage in this area, where should we put a second station? So there really is kind of, those purposes are a little bit at odds. It doesn't mean we couldn't look at that, because I understand why Mr. Shaken brings it up in terms of, again, the economies of scale, efficiencies of scale, especially when it comes to different parts of the operation where large vehicles are being used. But I do think that's one of the inherent challenges, is that DPWs need to be centrally located. Now, if we were talking about one singular public safety facility that covered all of town without satellite facilities, that would be perhaps a different calculation, but that's not what we're looking at right now.
Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. A lot of interesting ideas to think about. Very exciting stuff to think about, having affordable housing for seniors located right next to the senior center, right next to the community center, all within walking distance to a supermarket. All really terrific stuff. I guess my question is, I'm sort of seeing three big potential projects. Obviously, we wouldn't do everything at once. In doing this, did you get a sense of what buildings are failing, in a sense, not that they're physically unattractive, but they're not able to do what they're supposed to do, that have a level of urgency that should rise to the top?
I think the senior center definitely needs attention, and I think putting a lot of money into that existing senior center might be a mistake. I think you should look at another site, the senior center, and then find another use for the existing site. Yes, sir.
Before you go, there are several more pages in the packet. Were you planning to continue?
Yes.
Okay, let's keep going for a while, and then we can come back to questions, because it is getting later.
Right, so let's talk about budget. This is a lot of information, it's all on 3 pages, and I tried to get it all consolidated into these 3 pages. You have hopefully a larger copy than the 8.5 by 11 by 17. So this is organized in the same numerical sequence as the list in the beginning. So starting with number 1, again, this is not a priority one, this is just facility number 1. There are several scenarios, 1A through 1D, and I gave you some illustration of 1D and then suggested some swing space location for the others. So under scenario 1A, we would have swing space at the town hall. It would require 3 phases of work. I mentioned that when I showed you that diagram. This shows the square footages of work that would be required. This is the subtotal, and then these are the grand totals. And this is April 2025 dollars. I'll get into how we project that. But this estimate was done by professional estimators using initially 2022 dollars, and I said, you got to project forward at the earliest possible referendum date, and then give me a number for when construction would start. I'll show you a timeline of how we derive that, but you have to keep that in mind. Scenario 1B is putting swing space at Goodwin. That would be one phase. You move everybody into Goodwin, and then you bring them back. So you can see the total gross cost. And that, by gross cost, I mean construction cost, all the soft costs, engineering that would be required, owner's contingency, and FF&E, all bundled in. Scenario 1C would be
FF&E is
furniture, fixtures, and equipment.
Okay.
Thank you. It's a jargon I fell into, sorry. Scenario 1C would be to build an addition onto the municipal building, and then you move people into the addition, and you back, and when they move out, you do the renovation work. So it would be a combination of additions and renovations, and you can see the total on the right. Scenario 1D is the new municipal building, and also building, oh, I should have mentioned this. In each of these scenarios, 1A, 1B, 1C, and 1D, we're also adding the senior center. That's a line item here at the bottom. So you can push and pull, you can subtract if you want, but I thought it would be best to show in all of these scenarios an addition on the site of a new senior center. So scenario 1D would be a new building plus some swing space for police and fire and a new senior center. And then there are some add-on scenarios for the municipal building, and I showed you illustrations of mixed-use buildings, perhaps future tenant space that could be growth potential for the town hall. That's one possibility. Senior housing, affordable senior housing, that would be added on. A parking garage, that also could be potentially an add-on. Okay, facilities 2 through 5, that's all of the work I described.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Shakin?
On the previous page, the add-on is literally like if you wanted to do this on top of scenario 1D.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Facilities 2 through 5, all of the DPW buildings, as well as the Board of Ed facility for its vehicles. There you can see the total for that site. Maintenance shops, facility 6, that is simply moving from your existing depot campus location to a new facility. So this would be the cost of relocation. Facility number 7, that's just mothballing. So let me explain this. If you do nothing with that building and you want to wait until you find another use for it, you are going to spend money in what we call mothballing. You need to make sure that the building is ventilated to prevent mold growth. You need to have a minimum amount of heat services in it. And you need to make it safe, probably some alarm system that would notify town administration if there's a problem in the building. So that's what I would call mothballing expenses. If you do other things and you transition from Goodwin School to another use, you don't necessarily have to incur the mothballing expenses. It's only if the building is left vacant for any extended period of time. Similarly, in Facility 8, Vinton School, until you find another use for it, you're going to be spending some fit-out money to create mothballing, to make the building safe. Existing fire station, no cost at this time other than just continuing to maintain the facility. Use funds from the town's capital budgets. I guess that's nicknamed pay-as-you-go in this town. And further explore repurposing the storage into maybe a storage facility in the future. Existing fire station 207, this is the adding a wash bay to that facility for all town vehicles. Facility 11, no cost at this time, other than you would continue to pay as you go to keep improvements. Existing senior center, this is just mothballing expenses. Once you relocate from its present location to another location in town, you're going to have a vacant building. So you're going to have to do something to make sure that it's kept safe, ventilated, and doesn't have mold growth until you find another use for it or until you sell the building. And so that's why that number is included here. And then new public safety building, that's facility 13. This is, again, a combined police and fire. To the extent that we showed you that large police department, that would be your costs, again, in $2,025. Now, projecting construction cost over time has gotten trickier and trickier. Straight line here represents the typical growth of construction escalation over the past 20 years. It's generally been about 3 or 4% per year. And then a funny thing happened when COVID started. We thought it would escalate immediately, but it didn't. In fact, the cost came considerably lower on some projects that we had out to bid. And we think that's because construction companies were eager to add on work. They did not know what the future would hold. Now that's been rebounded. And so now we have all kinds of cost escalations. Based on what I've been looking at from other industry leaders in construction cost, it's just increasing. What should you carry forward? I think you should carry 7% per year for construction cost escalation. And the consultant we brought in agrees that that's probably a reasonable escalation for the next couple of years. So when would you think about doing any of these projects? So here's where you are today, September 2022. That's the number that we started with the construction cost estimator, and we said, look, you need to project forward. The earliest you could have a referendum would be in November of 2023. And assuming that that funding was authorized by the public, you would then get into a design period, and then construction could start at the earliest in April of 2025. So between now and April 2025, using those kinds of escalation rates, that would amount to 18% escalation over the next 30 months. If you extend it another year, that would be an escalation of 26% from today's costs. Something you have to keep in mind going forward. Hopefully, escalation will drop back down. But if you were to ask me today, that's what I would recommend that you carry forward. And then obviously, every year after that. So this tally, this is not meant for you to tally it up and say, oh my God, we have all of this ahead of us. No, this gives you a comparison between spring of 2025 and spring of 2026. This is my last slide. and then we can go back and answer some more questions. So as Ryan mentioned earlier, this conceptual study is only the beginning. We were told, we want you to look at everything and give us your opinion, your broad brush opinion about what you see. And I think we've done that. The next steps should include some further internal deliberation among staff, administration, and town council. Then I think you need to get some public feedback, some stakeholder feedback, and assuming that you agree that something needs to be done, pick a project, and then you need to get into detailed schematics. Also, at the same time, research any applicable grants, any grant opportunities, and then you're going to have to probably face the trade-offs. Trade-off of renovation versus new, and so on. Now I can answer questions.
Mr. Coleman.
Thank you for your presentation. I see some things that obviously are a priority for our town. One would be our senior center. I definitely agree that we need a new senior center, and I'd like to see the senior center and senior housing incorporated together. The problem I see with one of the scenarios is that we want a new municipal building, and we want the senior center and the housing as part of that municipal building. Is that correct?
It doesn't have to be part of the same building, but I'm suggesting it could be on the same campus. And if you're going to be spending money on the municipal center, seriously think about stacking the square footage in order to create some more site on the site for other possible uses.
When I look at a building and the needs of the town, I look at obsolescence in the building, and obviously our senior center is obsolete. I think we have some major problems with our public works department buildings as well. They appear to be obsolete. I do not see our municipal building at this moment as being obsolete. I think you may be tying the hands by trying to incorporate other projects along with the municipal building that is not obsolete. I think maybe we ought to look at that as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, that's obviously going to be part of our deliberations.
Yes.
However, I think it's important to take what we have heard, and that is that various departments don't fit in the existing building any longer. So either we redesign the building in some way or move some departments around. Mr. Shaken, you have your hand up.
Thanks. Yeah. I guess just a couple of comments, and just to expand a little bit on what I suggested earlier. Now that we've gotten through the budgetary piece of this, I think that in order for this to be any kind of feasible, when you're talking about sort of confronting the trade-offs, I think we need to be thinking about two things. The first one is, are there places where we can deliver better services for the community, or where the community could better come together than they are right now? And if we're going to be talking about projects of this magnitude, then we need to be thinking about not just where can we fit the square footage of a community of our existing facilities and the needs of those existing services, but how can we think about everything else that's currently going on in that campus, and making sure that it's adequately sort of suited for what the community needs. And so I'm talking about, we did not discuss the existing community center at all, besides to say that there will be some synergy with a senior center that's right next to it. I think we need to think about, again, as we're talking about this kind of money and dramatic transformation of the corner of South Eagleville and 195, what else can be done there, either in existing space or in non-existing space, to sort of better serve the community. And then I think similarly, when we're talking about some of the, the other facilities that are less community facing, where can we get efficiencies by building lots of new facilities? We have needs, we need to address them, but I will just reiterate that I can't imagine doing two separate projects, one to rebuild the Public Works garage on an existing site, and another one to acquire property to build a public safety facility. It only makes sense to me to locate those things together and to find a site that could fit everything together. And then the next step is to do what Councilor David Freudman always said we would never do, which is to then get rid of some of this land, to sell some of the land that we no longer need. And I guess to my eye, budgetarily, I'm not opposed to big and bold projects. I think the only thing that I would say is we need to, do the next step at the same time. We need to make decisions about, if we're going to move the senior center, what are we doing with that site? Are we selling it? Are we giving it to someone to develop housing on? And are there opportunities for us to recover some of our costs by divesting ourselves in some of the property that we're no longer using? And I think that needs to be part of our decision-making process.
I have a question about the senior center. Is it necessary? I'm trying to figure out if there is space between the existing community center to build the senior center without taking down some parts of this building. And I don't understand from your drawings whether that's true.
So we didn't look at that scenario exactly. We didn't diagram it. But we would need to reconfigure that building block that I had suggested for the senior center. Problem is that I guess it's the westernmost wing of the town hall. That wing is going to get very close to a senior center in that particular location. Maybe we should look at other locations, maybe in front of the community center, for example, for a senior center expansion, rather than adjacent to the town hall. If the town hall stays, that does make some restrictions.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
I'm sorry, if I may, continue that thought one more. So it's possible to do an addition onto the municipal building on the south side, for example, and then incorporate the westernmost wing of the municipal town hall to a senior center. So almost a continuation of community center, new senior, renovated town hall, what would be a senior, town hall, a big L shape that would be extended southward. That's a possibility.
Thank you. Mr. Shuren?
Yeah, just a little sort of off the wall. In any discussions, has there been any discussion of, years ago there was discussion about Region 19, E.O. Smith being gone, moving somewhere else. Anything in that?
We brought that up, and no, they don't want to revisit that question.
Yeah,
they were told
just for background context, we were invited and we accepted the invitation to attend a building committee meeting of the Region 19 board, and we asked that question. Basically, again, this is the very beginning of a process that would be very stakeholder involved, but neither one of us want to truck out a potential shared parking facility as a concept, only to find out, well, geez, you should have asked us first because we have plans to move to another. And so we were told categorically, well, nothing is impossible, further than anybody can see. Right now, they are all in on their existing facility. And they were very receptive to the need for a shared parking solution. And Richard, as he pointed out, additional spaces for certain academic programs that they're trying to administer. So there would be, theoretically, for some of this bigger, bolder concepts, a cost share component.
Strasburger?
I may have brought this up before. I know that you, in one of your scenarios, would like to bring the community center down here. I'm sorry, the senior center down here and tie it in with the community center, tie it in with the town hall. But it just seems that our investment in the senior center, I'll call it the senior center area of town, is further up where the senior center presently is. We have Wrights Village, we have all of those areas. In addition to that, we're also adding some more affordable housing. So it would seem to me that the most logical solution, the most logical place would to keep the senior center where that hub of the seniors are right now.
We came to a different conclusion. We think that there could be great synergy between and collaboration between the community center and the senior center.
And I would remind the council that the data from the community center is that it's a very significant proportion of its most active users are over the age of 55. So it almost already is a senior center of sorts. I would also like to point out we are really close to 10 o'clock,
Wow.
and we have a couple more items on our agenda. This is obviously, as Mr. Aylesworth has said, the beginning of the beginning, and there's a lot of thought and a lot of decisions yet to be made. So I would suggest that unless somebody has a pressing question about the presentation, that we move on, that we thank Mr. Cizik for his work and for TSKP's work, and you've given us a lot to think about.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you need from us right now?
No, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and I urge the council to spend some time with these pictures and charts and numbers, and this obviously will come up on our agenda in the not-too-distant future. I do want to point out that the senior center is on every single proposal at the very beginning, so thank you. The next item on our agenda is the Yukon and Willimantic sewer budgets. And to go into this, we need to become the Water Pollution Control Authority. I believe Mr. Shaken has that in mind.
Yes, I move to recess the town council and reconvene as the Mansfield Water Pollution Control Authority.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Coleman seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. Have we lost Mr. Bruder? I believe we have lost Mr. Bruder. All right, there's a motion on page 317.
318?
Wait a second, I haven't got it yet. No, the motion, oh yeah, wait a second. Yes, please. Here we go, got.
I move effective September 12th, 2022, to adopt the fiscal year 2022-23 Yukon sewer budget as prepared by the town staff.
There's second. Ms. Berthelot seconds. Is there any discussion of this? This is an item with it we have seen and been before us. We've had no presentation in town council. Are we ready to vote? All those in favor, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. Thank you. The next motion is a similar one on page 321. Somebody wish to make that motion? Mr. Shuren will make it.
Move effective September 12, 20, adopt the fiscal 2020 Willimantic sewer budget as.
Is there a second? Ms. Berthelot seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, thank you. Adopted unanimously. Council committees, Finance Committee.
Should I remember to become the council again?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we need a motion.
Mayor, I move to recess the Mansfield Water Pollution Control Authority and reconvene the town council.
Is there a second? Mr. Osberger seconds. All those in favor, please say, raise your hand. We're done.
Mayor,
Wait a minute.
We might be about ready to bring up the same thing, the cleanup of the vote. Is that what you were going to bring up?
yes.
Okay.
What is the problem?
So
Mayor.
I'll just briefly explain. So, and unfortunately, I didn't catch this when we prepared the packet, but for those council members that were present for the August meeting, you'll recall that we provided a corrected set of motions for the premium pay, and those were distributed. Then, of course, the matter was tabled. When we resurrected the agenda item summary and basically rolled the motions into the new packet, we didn't incorporate the motions as adjusted per the town attorney's suggestion. So basically, you guys voted on language that was not intended to be the language in the August meeting. So there's replacement motions. I sent Mr. Shaken and you actually, while we were sitting here, the verbiage, the way the motion should be worded. It actually addresses one of the questions that was asked about ensuring that the funds going to the respective school districts are clearly stated what their intended purpose is. So basically, well, that's basically it in a nutshell.
Okay, Mr.
Mayor,
Shaken.
I move to rescind the motion that we passed earlier tonight under agenda item
8A.
8A, and I further move, well, I guess we should vote on
All
that
right,
separate.
is there a
That's my
second to
motion.
rescind? Mr. Bertholet seconds the motion to rescind. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, it's unanimous. Go ahead, Mr. Shaken.
So I move effective today to amend the fiscal year 22-23 capital non-recurring fund budget to appropriate $51,600 to provide a one-time pandemic bonus in the amount of $400 pre-tax per employee to eligible employees working for the town of Mansfield in the amount of $400, and further to amend the FY 22-23 capital non-recurring fund budget to appropriate $85,600 Mansfield Board of Education to provide a one-time pandemic bonus in the amount of $400 pre-tax per employee to eligible Mansfield Board of Education employees, and finally further to amend the FY 22-23 capital non-recurring fund budget to appropriate $56,800 to the Region 19 Board of Education to provide a one-time pandemic bonus in the amount of $400 pre-tax per employee to eligible Region 19 school district employees.
Thank you. Is it Ms. Berthelot seconds? Is the motion clear? Anybody have any questions? Mr. Shaken?
Just these numbers add up to the same number we did earlier. This is just the better, as Ryan said, the better way of doing it per the town attorney.
All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, it is Mr. Shaken. You better do a roll call on this one, Ms. Jane.
Osberger,
No.
Berthelot,
Yes.
Coleman,
No.
Rand,
Yes.
Curran,
Abstain.
Aiken.
Yes.
All right. The motion has been adopted. Next is reports of council committees. Let's start with finance, Mr. Shaken.
Hi, we met this evening prior to this meeting. Our agenda consisted entirely of the items we dealt with on the consent agenda tonight, and we did not discuss anything else.
All right, personnel, Mr. Shuren.
Yeah, bear with me a little, given the late hour. Initially, my thought was that we would have people complete the evaluation of the town manager, which we've discussed before, that was developed by the Personnel Committee, and I could collect those. Still do that. If some people wish to rather take the evaluation instrument tonight and complete it subsequently, as long as we can get it back by Friday, that would work as well, giving us time for the Personnel Committee to complete the tabulation, which we'll do with the assistance of Human Resources, and have our meeting prior to the next council meeting. So I leave it up to you.
How do we get it back to you by Friday?
That would be the question. You could mail it. You could drop it off at Town Hall in Holly Schaefer's office. I prefer that you drop it off in Holly Schaefer's office.
And it's anonymous.
It's
so-
anonymous, but if you do put your name on the envelope so we know who sent it in. But it is anonymous. We won't look at what you wrote to see that we've gotten it from you.
Ms. Cotton?
Is there an online version by chance?
Yeah, good question, and I'm not equipped to answer whether we can do it by a Survey Monkey process. Maybe someone else can guide me with that.
It has always been done that way in the past.
Okay, so we can have Human Resources send it out.
I believe, I could be wrong, I'm reasonably confident that actually, in anticipation of that, I think the survey instrument has been built in SurveyMonkey already. They kind of pivoted away from that in anticipation of what you're trying to accomplish tonight, but
So what we will do is have it sent out tomorrow morning and ask people please to respond no later than Friday, earlier if possible.
Sounds good.
Okay?
Thank you. And we will have this town manager self-evaluation.
We already have that.
Okay.
hopefully that went out last week, right?
Oh, I missed it. All right. Committee on Committees? Sam's gone. Okay, we'll wait until the next meeting for that then. Anything on departmental and advisory committee reports? You have petitions, requests, and communications. Anything there that anybody wishes to address? Requests for future agendas? Mr. Osberger, followed by Mr. Coleman.
Yes, I would like to have John Armstrong come in here one of these preceding months to give us a report on what's going on at Yukon.
All right, so we do need a fall report from Sergeant Merrill as well as from Mr. Armstrong.
Right.
Do you, so is it the desire, because I know you have, oftentimes you go deeper into the fall semester to kind of get a report on how the semester is going, so do you want to have a sort of preemptive, before the semester gets too far in, report from Mr. Armstrong?
I think we want to report on move-in weekend, and this first, on September.
Okay.
And then we can do the later one later.
Yeah, before they go on break and Thanksgiving.
Okay, Mr. Coleman?
I really don't have all that much luck putting new agenda items up for the next town council meeting. I mean, really, I feel like as though as a minority party that I am completely being ignored.
But you did want something on the school.
I most certainly would like to put on the agenda the motion that I tried to bring forth today.
Right. Well, let's put a report from on the school building project on the agenda.
Okay.
And if the motion is appropriate at the time, you
Okay.
can put it on.
Thank you.
Could we get an update that would include the school busing report? And because we're getting questions along those lines as well. Any other issues?
Go home.
Did we have any discussion or on the panhandling issue, which we told the gentleman who came in initially that we would put on an agenda?
We have had some discussion with the town attorney, but there's more to be had. I will tell you that there's Supreme Court decisions that make it very clear that unless somebody is harassing or aggressive or menacing in some way, it is a speech issue. So I think there are towns that have tried to do this and have found their resolutions contested successfully or unenforceable. Mr. Shaken first, and then Mr. Osberger.
I have something different, which is just to request some follow-up. It doesn't have to necessarily be on our agenda, on the letter from Sherry Rachelson about property owned by her parents on Dog Lane and a drainage easement from the town. There's a great deal of information in our packet about communication with town staff, and so at least request Ryan to follow up to make sense of matters, and then if there's action the council should or wants to take, that gets on our agenda.
Yeah, I'm happy to, there very well may be a need for, if there's any action to be taken on the easement itself. One of the things that we're trying to get is a legal opinion from the town attorney as to whether or not town council action would be needed to alter the easement. It's a question of how the easement came to be to begin with, and so trying to ferret that out's been a bit of a challenge. I guess I would just simply say that, you know, the chronology and some of the communication that was summarized in the constituents' letter, it's incomplete. There was definitely more back and forth than was reflected there. I'll leave it at that. But just as far as, you know, questions of responsiveness from town staff, I don't think, you know, certainly not think there's any intention to do so. It just didn't really paint a full picture. But we are working diligently, trying to work with the town attorney to bring closure to this, because I think we can all empathize with the family's current situation, trying to get this property sold, trying to transition elderly parents into a new living situation, and we're very much working to bring finality to this.
Thank you.
I can say that, to Ron's point there, that there has been some considerable amount of discussion on social media with regards to the panhandling thing, and that people are quite and rather displeased, if not have been harassed. And
No, but it's a question of should it be on the agenda? So you are backing up the suggestion that we do something future, as soon as we
we'll
get,
just discuss it.
as soon as we get something from the town attorney.
What I'm thinking of is assuring appropriate services are provided to those people as well as.
Good idea.
Yeah. All right. Any other future agenda items?
Is it the council's desire to have the school building committee update or school construction project update at the next meeting? Just, I'm assuming the answer is yes, like the September 26th meeting, if at all possible? Okay.
Mr. Shagan?
I would say, if I recall, Mr. Aylesworth, your report, where you answered a question from Brian, I can't remember at the beginning of the meeting, you said something along the lines of we're nearing a time when there can be with some certainty, a timeline given of
And so it'd be fair to
construction.
say that the 26th would be right on the press, like, we could be a day or two into we now have the answer, or we could be a day or two away from we now have the answer. I'm asking in part because the mayor brought up like the bus, and that's obviously a more here and now. Tried to provide some feedback from the
I would
superintendent.
rather have it before there's a date, because I think the council needs to know what some of the variables are.
Okay.
And then are we going to have them again when there's a date?
Well, we'll see.
Okay.
Maybe we don't need one when there's a date, you know?
Well, I'll share information as we get closer, as we're formalizing the agenda, and we can make, you guys can make an informed decision at that time.
Right, okay. Ms. Berthelot moves to adjourn. Is there a second? Mr. Coleman seconds. All those in favor say, raise your hands. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Good night, everyone.
Yeah,
Recording stopped.